Hello guys, welcome back to my channel and enjoy this fanfic part 3. Now let's start the fanfic. Oh, what hit me? Naruto groaned aloud as bright light shined directly down upon him, causing him to groan even more and put his hand in front of his eyes in order not to go blind from the sun. He didn't know where he was, but wherever it was hot, very hot. So much so that his forehead was sweating an awful lot and could feel his clothes were sticking to him a little, making him feel a little uncomfortable. The ground beneath him was flat and soft, however it felt loose and like it was shifting beneath him. What am I lying on? He thought as he began to sit up. When he went to rub the back of his neck, he found sand covering it. Look behind him completely, he saw his whole back was covered in sand. What the? He said before he finally took a good look around and noticed they were currently under the shade of a few cacti that were piled together, which were stationed in the middle of the desert. Where the hell are we? He shouted out, causing movements to stir next to him. Looking over, he saw Anko and Itachi all lying next to him, but were showing signs of beginning to wake up. Guys, wake up. We got problems. He said as he shook them both awake. The last he remember was being in the classroom with the other teams that passed the first tests. Okay already. Take it easy dude, Anko complained as she began to sit up and rub her eyes. Itachi did the same and was blinking his eyes. As they both began to wake up, they began to notice where they were. They blinked furiously as if believing it was a genjutsu and even tried to dispel it. Once they realized it was not a genjutsu and they were really in the desert, Anko summed up everyone's thoughts. Where the air we? The desert by the looks of things. Damn, Proctor must have knocked us out with knockout gas, he said as the trio began to shakily stand up. For the next minute they checked themselves over and sighed happily that everyone still had all their belongings. Naruto was especially thankful no one took his blade, but then again he had that in a storage seal on his right wrist since he did not want people seeing his beautiful blade just yet. There's a note, Itachi said as he looked over at one of the cactuses and saw that pinned to the center cactus was indeed a note. They all got up and went towards it. Itachi delicately took it off, not wanting to get struck by one of the prickles of the cactus plant, and read out what it said. Congrats for passing the first exam. Now the real test begins. Your team has been stranded in the middle of the Suna Desert, to which your team must survive. You have 5 days to return to the Suna village. If you do not return in that time, then you will be disqualified. Along the way there will be a surprise in store. Oh goody. This sounds like a heap of fun. Naruto commented dryly as Anko and Itachi could not help but agree with him. So we are stranded. Who the hell came up with this stupid idea? Anko wailed as the two sighed and shook their heads. 5 days? Huh, I don't suppose anyone actually know which direction we have to go in, do you? Naruto asked as he looked around them. I guess that is another thing we have to figure out. Navigation and stuff like that. Itachi added, though he was more worried about getting food and water once they ran out. Well, if we have 5 days, then I guess we should aim to get there sooner than that. Everyone check your packs to see what food or water we have, since water especially is going to be something we will need to treasure in the desert. It took a few minutes, but they quickly figured it out. They had about 2 bottles of water each, along with a few ration bars between them, as well as 1 rice ball each. It was not much, but it would have to do. If we run out, then we either have to hope we find some kind of oasis and that Kami is smiling at us, or we make quicker haste towards finding Suna. Well, that is great and all, but how exactly do we find Suna? I don't see anyone with a compass. Anko said, making both Naruto and Itachi think. They thought about it and now really did wish they had a compass and a map. But if they wanted to be Chunin, then they had to figure out news way to get back to Suna. Naruto, Itachi asked, getting the blonde attention. Your sensor ability, how far can you sense with it? My sensor ability. I can sense pretty far. I mean, when I was 5, I could sense at least a few miles, but I have never tried anything that long range. I know there is no chance I could sense all the way to Suna since I have no idea how far out we are. Don't try and find the village, instead look for the nearest sign of life and we can head in that direction. What about your Sharingan? Said Anko, thinking of a way that she could help out. But what if the other sign of life is another team? It's a chance we will have to take. Plus my Sharingan can't see that far. Replied Itachi. I got it. Both stopped talking as they looked towards Anko, who was beaming with pride. I know how we can find our way back to Suna, she said, getting raised eyebrows from both boys. Would you like to tell us this way of yours? Naruto asked as Anko grinned. Better. I can show you, she said before biting her thumb, and planting it on the ground. Kuchio's no jutsu. A tiny cloud of smoke appeared just in front of Anko, and I watched a small green-skinned snake appeared and slithered towards Anko and up her arm. What can I do for you, Miss Anko? The snake asked. Rella, do you think you could point us in the direction of the sand village, Suna? We have to make it there in the space of 5 days, though we don't have much food and water, so we would prefer to get there as soon as we can. The snake nodded its head and slithered back to the ground and put its head in the air as its body coiled around on the sand. The trio waited for a couple of minutes as the 2 slits that were its nostrils smelled the air, along with its forked tongue slipping out of its mouth and tasting the air. Once the few minutes were up, the serpent's eyes twitched before it began to slither away, motioning for the trio to follow after it. After putting on their cloaks to protect their bodies from the harsh light of the hot sun and try to keep themselves cool and not sunburnt, they quickly followed after the snake, with Anko up front and then Naruto and Itachi behind. Wow, that was handy. How did she find it so quickly? Naruto asked Anko as they got their things together and began walking after the snake. I had Rella familiarize herself with the scent that Suna gave off. It may not be a person, but the village does have a unique smell accustomed to it. Plus my summoned snakes can sense chakra with their inferred vision, picking up heat signatures from a great distance. We may be far out, but a snake has great enhanced senses to that of a person. Naruto whistled to himself while Itachi nodded at the explanations. Summoning animals really are amazing, and the things they can do can even trump a shinobi. You know, I kind of wish I had one myself. They would really be amazing to have as a partner. I agree. They would be greatly beneficial. It is a shame the Uchiha does not have a summoning contract bound to us like a few other clan in the world. I can see they would be of great use. Anko looked back at Naruto while they continued to follow Rella. Well, aren't you going to sign the Toad contract, Naruto? I mean, your dad had signed it as well as his sensei Jiraiya, who is like always with your family. Wouldn't you sign that? Naruto's face grew cold for a second before he steeled himself and looked away. No, I probably won't be signing it. Knowing my parents, they will probably just give it to the twins and Mina and leave me out like usual, he said, though he whispered the last part out. Anko looked at him a little confusingly, as did Rella, who her back a little before getting back to the view in front of her. Why would you say that? I am sure they will let you sign it if you asked, she said, wanting to understand what he meant by it, but saw Itachi shake his head to her as if telling her to stop asking. Besides, just because I won't have the Toad summons doesn't mean I won't have a summoning contract one day. It might not be the Toad, or Slug or the Ape contracts that Hokage-sama and Ero Sennin hold, or the ones Ba-chan and Gigi have, but I will hold one eventually, and it will beat the other contracts, he said, thinking about other animals that may have contracts to them and which he would love to have. Anko shrugged. Well, good luck with that. Summoning contract aren't exactly easy to come by. Then I will have to be on the lookout in the future, he said as they followed Rella. Nightfall. After hours of trekking through the harsh Suna desert and using up about 1/3 of their water supply, the group stopped for then might at a small rock formation that provided some cover for them that they could use for shelter. After thanking her and managing to catch a desert mouse as a treat that Anko gave her, Rella disappeared and went back to her home. The trio made a small supper with what they could spare for the first night before they got in their sleeping bags. Unlike the sweltering heat of the daytime, the night was quite cold as the moon hit them along with the cool desert winds. "It's a nice night tonight," Naruto said as he lay down on the soft sand looking up at the star-filled sky with Itachi on his right and Anko on his left. "You know," Anko said leaning on her elbows and turning to Naruto. "Why don't we just travel through the night instead? It would be a lot less strenuous since we won't have the heat of the sun hitting us and no one would be expecting it." "I had thought about that, but there lies a problem with that theory." Itachi spoke up from his spot. "If we were to travel at night we would have multiple problems with defending ourselves as well as making our way to the village. There will be no daylight so we will not be able to see a thing. Plus there are poisonous animals in the desert, if we tread on one in the dark and it hits us." Naruto nodded as Anko thought about it. "I guess that a good point. But can't we use the light from the moon? And what would happen if one night the clouds cover the moon therefore giving us no light?" Anko pouted as he spoke to her like she was a child and went back to lying on her back and crossed her arms as Naruto looked at her playfully. "Fine then." Naruto laughed while Anko shook his head at his teammate's amusement as he continued to stare up at the sky while Naruto and Anko made idle chat. "I wonder how Ka-san is doing back in Suna," he thought to himself despite knowing Makoto was more than capable of looking after herself since she was a powerful shinobi. As Naruto made idle chat with Anko, Naruto thought back to the snake he had seen Anko use earlier and it had brought up a question in his mind that he had about Anko ever since the first time he met her and used those snake abilities in front of him. "Hey Anko," he said getting her attention. "How did you get the snake contract anyway?" He saw next to him that Anko froze up and in her eyes had a brief look of panic hit her before she narrowed them a little and looked directly at him. From his spot Itachi looked over as well since he had wondered the same thing. "Why do you ask? You have never wondered before?" she asked. "Well, like you said earlier, you said that summoning contracts rare to come by since not many shinobi actually have them. And it made me wonder just how you managed to get yours. The snake contract is a very powerful summoning contract. My Gigi told me about one of his past students that went bad took off when I was only a few years old. Gigi told me that he had the snake summoning contract and took it with him, so it made me curious to how you have it." Naruto looked back at Anko but when he did he was surprised to see an angry Anko lunge at him with an angry and upset look on her face. She landed on him, but Naruto quickly turned the tables and managed to use his greater physical strength and flip her over onto her back while he managed to pin her hands to her sides as well place his knees on hers to stop her from kicking him. Itachi was going to help, but Naruto gave him a look that told him not to interfere. "Don't you dare say that. I earned that contract and that bastard betrayed me," she shouted as Naruto put his hand over her mouth since they did not want nearby teams to hear them. "Anko, we still are in the second exam. You must try and be quiet," he said, but felt a little taken back when he saw tears cascading down her face. "Anko-chan. He promised he would look after me but instead he turned his back on me, saying I outlived my usefulness and branded me forever with his curse mark. I trusted him." She sobbed as Naruto was not sure what to do so he just hugged her into his chest and wrapped his arms around her. Itachi watched in silence but listened in and felt his heart go to his friend. "Tell me what happened to you, Anko-chan, tell me so I can help you." Naruto gently pushed as Anko sniffed a little before she explained. She explained how 6 years ago when she was 4, the snake Sanin Orochimaru had taken an interest in her and had taken her under his wing and made himself her guardian and mentor. She had spent 4 years with him and he had even taken her with him when he had turned his back on the village. At first she said he was a nice person who made her feel at ease but then would disappear for long periods of time and each time he had become more and more sinister-like. Then one day when he came back he had bitten her out of the blue and put some kind of seal on her neck that caused her to fall into excruciating pain as it made her body feel like it was on fire and being ripped in two. Afterward when she had woken up he had shaken his head at her saying it had not given him the desired result he had wanted before just leaving her where she was and never looking back. 2 days later she had been found by a team of hunter nin from Konoha where she was quickly returned. Why has my father and mother not tried to get rid of this seal? Naruto said with a look of anger on his face as he looked at the seal on her shoulder but felt Anko shrugged. I'm not too sure. The Hokage said the once that without knowing the formula Orochimaru used, it would be difficult to destroy it. Plus they said he put some of his essence into it, making it darker and it made those uneasy to try and tamper with it in case it backfired. Naruto nodded and though it did make sense, he understood where they were coming from, though it still made him pissed as he covered the seal up. Anko-chan look at me, he said as Anko looked up at him. As you know I am practicing and training to be a Fuinjutsu master and after seeing this seal and hearing your story I will make you this promise right here and now. I promise I will make Orochimaru pay for hurting you and I will get that seal of you. I promise it on my way of the shinobi. He said as Anko looked up at him with shocked and wide eyes. I second that, Itachi muttered making the two look at him forgetting he was even there. We will make Orochimaru sorry for ever harming you Anko-san. We will bring you justice. Guys, Anko said quietly before she grabbed Naruto and Itachi from where he lay and hugged them both tightly. Thank you both so much. She muttered making the two boys smiled and returned the hug to her before they decided to call it a night and prepare for the second day of trekking through the desert of Suna. Next morning, the trio woke as soon as the sun hit their faces and quickly packed or sealed their stuff away before making their way back towards the sand village. Anko looked happier than either of the two boys had seen her before as she summoned her snake summon which quickly led the way again though this time at a quicker pace since none of them wanted to spend another 4 days in the sweltering heat of the Suna desert. As they walked they felt Kami smiling on them when they found a few rows of cacti on their path. Knowing that cacti stored water within them, Naruto cut off some of the cacti parts and the trio drained what they could from the cacti and got more water to last them an extra day if they needed it. They walked for a few hours and were feeling good about themselves since they were making good time until Itachi and Anko noticed Naruto had stopped. Naruto. Naruto placed his index finger to his lips. There is someone here. He said instantly making Anko and Itachi on guard as they grouped together back to back in a triangle formation. Where are they? Anko asked as Itachi had his Sharingan activated when Naruto had his eyes closed searching around them. After a few moments of searching his eyes narrows 20 meters east of them. There. They all turned to the spot Naruto had pointed at before firing off their attacks. Kaden. Gokaku no Jutsu. Sweden. Tepudama. Sanejishu. The three attacks surged forward together right to the spot where Naruto's sensor abilities pinpointed. Just as they neared a trio reddish-orange balls burst out of the sands and hit the attacks causing a small explosion to occur that knocked sand all over the place from the gust of the attack. As the sand and smoke cleared a figure jumped out from the smoke cloud covered in a light brown cloak with an Anbu mask covering their face. Looking at them they could not tell whether the cloaked figure was a male or a female. Fuden. K. Senbon, the figure said in a voice that was monotone and must have a voice change to it since they could not tell their gender. A flurry of wind made Senbon shoot from the user's hand and towards the team. Before they hit, Naruto slammed his hands to the ground. Doden. Doryuheki. As the wall came up and successfully stopped the wind made Senbon form striking them, the figure leapt over the wall and pushed themselves forward and towards the group. They landed in the middle of the group, making the trio jump back. Naruto unsealed Shisui and swung at the masked shinobi, but was blocked by a chakra-enhanced kunai. "Why are you attacking us?" he asked as Anko came up from the right side and kicked the shinobi, who then managed to duck out of the way. "I can't let just anyone get to the next round of the Chunin exams now, can I? You three have come quite far in such a short amount of time," the figure said, making the three look at them in surprise. "So it is part of the test. We have to get past you in order to get to the next round," Naruto said as he watched as the unnamed shinobi nodded. Naruto looked at Anko, who was still trying to hit the shinobi, and nodded to her, who then nodded back. Both pulled away and jumped a fire distance before the unnamed ninja saw Itachi making hand signs. "Kaden. Hosenka no Jutsu," he called out as 5 fireballs shaped like flowers shot towards the shinobi. They hit their target, though when the attack cleared they saw a log in its place. "Kawarimi," Naruto said. He searched around but sensed them underneath Anko. "Anko, beneath you." Anko jumped just as hands shot out of the sand that went to grab her ankle as they person shot out of the ground following after Anko and deliver a hard kick to her abdomen that made Anko get the wind knocked out of her. As she fell, Itachi came up from behind her and caught her while Naruto sent a flurry of shuriken towards the enemy but deflected them with a ray of their own shuriken. "Sweden. Mizorapa," Naruto said as a jet of water shot out of his mouth. "Kaden. Hisekasho," the enemy said as ash poured out of their mouth and formed a protective layer in front of them that the jet of water hit instead. Before Naruto could make a move, the figure appeared next to him and punched him, making him fall back. Before he could land, though, the figure quickly appeared behind him and kicked him in the back as well before finally throwing him towards his friends. When he landed, Itachi grabbed a kunai with a paper bomb on it and threw it towards their enemy. It exploded just as it went past her head. Put quickly saw they had used the kawarimi once again. "You will have to do better than that," the shinobi said, appearing behind them, and used the wind senbon on them again. "Kaden. Bukaheki no Jutsu," Itachi said as a wall of flames erupted in front of them which stopped the wind senbon. However, the shinobi jumped through the fire wall and lunged at Itachi, and the two began to taijutsu spar. Naruto recovered from the hits from earlier and went forward with Anko to help their teammate. As the figure managed to trip Itachi up and made a kunai appear out of their sleeve and drove it towards Itachi, Naruto appeared beside Itachi, blocking the strike with Shisui. Anko came up to the side and kicked the figure, which managed to connect this time. However, the enemy shinobi grinned underneath their mask before they suddenly dispersed in a gust of wind. "Wind clone," Naruto said as they looked where they had been standing before a voice rang out behind them. "Fuden. Teifukushiki," they said as a tornado of wind erupted from their palms and shot towards the team. "Disperse," Naruto said as the trio jumped away. But when they did, what they guessed was clones came up from behind them and kicked the three of them away. The three landed with a thud as the clones disperse in wind again as the shinobi approached them. "Maybe I should use my new sword technique," he thought, since he really did not want to use Mokuden for this. He could not risk being exposed as a Mokuden user just yet. "We need to work together. Whoever they are no Chunin. They must be stronger, maybe a Jonin level like Makoto sensei. Why do we get stuck with someone who a high-level ninja? Why couldn't we get a Chunin?" Anko whined as she stood up. "I guess they thought we were different from the others. I don't think we should disappoint," Itachi said as the three nodded. "If we work together we can do it," Naruto said as the three readied themselves. "Not giving up yet. How do I know you are worth my time?" the ninja asked. Watch and see. Naruto said. Tsunejishu, Anko called out as two snakes erupted from her sleeves. They struck at the shinobi who jumped back. When the masked ninja did she saw a flurry of kunai from Naruto and Itachi heading towards them. Futon. Daitapa, they said as a blast of wind erupted from her knocking the kunai away. When she looked towards them she saw Itachi and Anko had vanished. Looking up she saw the two coming down towards them and engage the masked shinobi. Itachi kicked high while Anko attacked low, making the shinobi work a little harder than before but still managed to rather elegantly dodge the attacks. As she attacked, the masked shinobi noticed Naruto had now vanished. Her eyes searched around all the while defending the other two. She saw Anko have an opening and went to kick her but stopped when a thud was heard behind them. Looking round she saw a bottle of water on the ground that was used to collect the water from the cacti from earlier. Sweden. Sentu no Umi, a voice said from behind revealing Naruto who had used the camouflage jutsu to hide himself from the enemy. Their eyes widened a little from the name of the jutsu and looked down to the bottle of water that was still before the water suddenly shot out of the bottle and created a sharp spire about 5 foot high. The shinobi cursed inwardly and had to jump forward, towards Anko and Itachi in order to get out of the way. When they did though, Anko's foot hit the ninja's stomach hard and Itachi threw a kunai that grazed their right arm. Shaking out of her stupor, the ninja went to make some hand sign but felt another presence from behind them. Naruto appeared from behind and has both his hands on Shisui. The masked shinobi noticed the blade has a blue aura around it showing Naruto is pouring chakra into it. Bringing the sword up for a moment with both his hands as he channeled his chakra though the blade before swinging it down, making a after image be left in its place form how quickly he brought the blade down. Kiri Shiger, he said as the blade hit the kunai that was being used to stop it but it cut right through it and the tip of the blade managed to slice across the ninja's cheek and a bit of their shoulder. Shit. The shinobi said aloud without the voice muffler revealing to all of them that it was a woman behind the mask. The now revealed Kunoichi jumped in the air away before making a few hand signs. Shikuden. Kahozatsu, she said making the trio look in surprise before 3 swirling balls of gas just like what they had first seen earlier appeared and shot towards them. Doden. Doryuheki, Naruto said as he shot mud out of his mouth to make a mud-like wall in front of him and the others which they all crowed behind as the explosion hit making the wall quickly crack and get destroyed. It pushed the trio back and made them land on the sand but they quickly got back up. What was that? Scorch style? I have never even heard of that before. Is it some kind of bloodline? Anko asked. An old bloodline of Suna, though I am unsure of how many there are that can use it since I don't think there are many left. Itachi said as they readied for another attack but instead saw there was no one there. Naruto, they asked as they looked at Naruto to see him concentrating before he let out a relieved sigh. They're gone. I can just about sense her leaving the area. So we pass then and can keep going back to the village. Anko asked as Itachi nodded. Thanked Kami. She said before dropping to the ground which was quickly followed by Naruto and Itachi as they could finally catch their breath. Man, that match was intense. She was so strong and her hits were hard. Not as hard as Ba-chan but they still packed a wallop. Naruto said as the others agreed with him. She was very skilled. From what I could see from her speed and strength and following her movements with my Sharingan, she must have been Jonin level. I think my Ka-san would have even had a bit of a struggle with her. Itachi mentioned, panting slightly from the fight. Naruto grinned. Well, whoever she is, I want to fight her again one day. She seems like an awesome opponent. He said, making Itachi and Anko shake their heads, but had to admit they agreed with him. As they rested they noticed a small scroll sitting a little beside them that they just noticed. Itachi took it and looked at the symbol on the scroll and showed a symbol of the Chunin exams. I guess that's for us. Naruto asked. Since we passed this test, I guess this is just to confirm it. The kunoichi must have left it here just before she departed. They all accepted the answer and took another few minutes to rest from their recent skirmish. Elsewhere, the masked shinobi dropped down beside a rock formation a few miles away from the battle she had just been in and took a few ragged breaths as she got her bearings together. Those brats were actually pretty good. She breathed out as she hanged, making her form get covered by a small cloud of smoke. When it disappeared, it showed Pakura, the proctor of the Chunin exams. She winced a little as she bandaged the cut on her shoulder before getting it seen to later when she returned to the village. She then traced over the small cut on her cheek. The blood had dried off, but she was surprised that the trio, Naruto mainly, had even managed to hit her. Those kids are quite something, she thought, having been impressed by Naruto in the first exam, which prompted her to want to test him during the second. I may not have been going all out, but to actually wound me and make me use my Shokuden is not an easy feat. Clicking the joint in her neck, she began making her back to the Suna, all the while thinking. That blonde kid has some skill. He might just win this exam. Next day, 2 Chunin gate guards stood as the entrance to the sand village as they watched over the horizon. As they watched, 3 figured in cloaks that covered their body made their way towards them. The 2 guards readied themselves for some kind of fight but saw the kids' faces when they got closer and recognized them from the other day. As the trio got near, they took off their hoods as Naruto stood forward and showed the scroll they were given the other day. So you 3 actually made it back? One of the guards asked, looking a little impressed. It was one of the fastest times for the Suna survival exam. You're the first team to make it back. Well, don't we feel special? Anko said as her arms were a little sunburnt from where the sun has managed to get them. Naruto and Itachi were in a similar state. Once the trio had suppressed the disguised Pakura, they continued their way through the desert, though this time at a quickened pace as they now just wanted to get to Suna as quickly as possible. The desert quickly became one of their least favorite places. After another night of camping and a lot more running, Naruto finally managed to sense the village nearby as he recognized the signatures there from the other day. So what do we do now? Itachi asked the guarded as they pointed to the scroll in Naruto's hand. Open it up. Now that you have arrived at the gate, you can now open the scroll. The other guard said as the trio looked at the scroll and shrugged. Naruto opened the scroll before it began to shine. He placed it on the floor in front him and took a step back. After a couple of seconds, smoke covered the scroll before it quickly got swept away and revealed a smiling Makoto looking at her team with a proud look. Ka-san, Itachi said, surprised, while Naruto and Anko grinned at seeing their sensei. Well done, all 3 of you, she said as she quickly glomped the trio in a massive hug. I knew you would all do it, but I was still so worried all the same. So since we made it back, does that mean we pass? Naruto asked with a hopeful expression while Anko did the same, though Itachi was a bit more suppressed. Makoto laughed a little before nodding. Yes, congratulations, you have passed the second round of the Chunin exams, she said as Naruto and Anko fist pumped the air while Itachi smiled. After getting their stuff together and getting a well done from the gate guards, they made their way towards their hotel since there was another 2 days to go for the other teams to arrive before they would find out what was next for the third test. Though Naruto mentally groaned at the thought of starting off with 2 opponents rather than 1, he headed in and just got over it. Besides, he figured it would be a great test of his strength. Though he noticed that when he looked over at the Iowa team, the girl from the first test was staring at him. At first it looked like a confused frown, as if she was trying to figure something out before she scowled a little and looked away. He decided that girls were just too weird for him to understand. Okay everyone, Makoto said, stopping them. I'm going to go see the Hokage and tell him we're back. The rest of you can head on home and get some well-deserved rest. Though I expect you all to be training for the next portion of the exams. She said as the three nodded. Now since I am Itachi's mother as well as sensei, I am going to be able to help him every day get prepared for the exams in a month's time. That won't mean I will leave any of you out though. If you want my help, just come to Uchiha clan compound and I will help. Thanks sensei, but I think I might get a few of the older Jonin to help. Kurenai-san said she would help me if I got past the first 2 exams, as did Ibiki. I might ask them for some help. She said as Makoto nodded before looking at Naruto. I might ask Gigi and Ba-chan to help me prepare. Makoto nodded again but reminded them to come get her if they needed help, since she wanted to help all her students equally, which both Naruto and Anko thanked her for. The group departed and Naruto made his way back to his home. When he arrived home, he found it rather more silent than usual and wondered where everyone was until he tried to sense them. To his surprise, he sensed Kushina and his siblings all outside in the backyard. When he walked out, he stopped right in his spot and felt a bang of hurt in his heart at the scene in front of him. There was Kushina holding a kunai in her hand and was showing Eiji and Mito how to properly hold and throw one at a wooden post. Both were using wooden kunai since they were too young to use the metal ones at the moment. She's teaching them, he thought as his hands shook a little from the scene, but quickly shook himself out of it when little Mina, who was chasing a butterfly, spotted him and let out a happy gurgle as she began making her way over to him. Naru, she said as Naruto's eyes softened and bent down to hug her a little and nuzzled her little nose with his own. Hi Mina-chan, have you been a good girl? He asked as Mina happily nodded before giggling madly as she began playing with Naruto's blonde hair. Despite him not being around much, those around them could see how much Mina adored her eldest brother and was always following after him when she could, though her little legs could not take her very far. Even though he was distancing himself from his family, there was just a little part of him that could not bear distancing himself from Mina. Plus she had solidified her spot in his heart when her first word was his name, much to everyone's surprise. Naru-ni. Naruto heard as the footsteps belonging to a small child were rapidly coming towards him. He looked to the side and braced himself as a blur of blonde with a few red streaks in it jumped into him and hugged him tightly. I missed you so much. Mito said as she gave Naruto a big sloppy kiss on the cheek, making Naruto hesitate a little before plating a small kiss on the top of her head. Eiji quickly followed after his sister and hugged his older brother around the waist while Kushina walked up to him at a slow pace. Welcome home Naru-chan. Well done for getting into the third part of the exam. She commented as she took Mina from Naruto, much to the little girl's dismay. Yeah, thanks Ka-chan. I'm just lucky to have a great sensei and teammates. He said as Kushina nodded a little. Really? Makoto Baka is a good sensei. Who knew? She said teasingly about her friend, though stopped when she saw Naruto give her a small glare. Don't speak about Makoto sensei that way, Ka-san. She has done her best and I am forever grateful to be under her tutelage. He said sternly before rubbing his eyes a little and turned around to head back inside. I'm going to bed. I'm a little tired from the trip. Kushina didn't reply but looked at Naruto head back inside with a slightly struck look on her face. Naru-chan has never glared at me before. She thought before shaking her head. He's just tired and needs his rest. She turned around to see her children with slightly sad looks on their faces as Naruto walked away before the twins went back to their wooden kunai practice and Mina went back to chasing butterflies. If she had paid more attention, she would have noticed Naruto use san instead of chan like he normally did. Later on that evening, Naruto lay in his bed as he looked up at the ceiling as the light from the moon gently shone through the curtains of his window. He had stayed in his room to rest for most of the day and only really went down when his father came home and they had dinner round the table. Most of the dinner talk was taken up by Mito and Eiji, who were talking about their day with Kushina, while Mina was either gazing into space or was laughing at the funny faces Naruto was making at her. When it got to Naruto and the Chunin exams, he only gave them short answers and didn't get into the details since he was not really in the mood for talking. Both Minato and Kushina frowned a little at that and wanted him to tell them more, however he just stayed mostly quiet, ignoring them when they asked for more details. Afterwards he took his dish and cutlery and had them washed before he went back to his room. He was going to visit Hiruzen tomorrow to get some training in for the Chunin exam's third round and hoped Tsunade and Shizune would join them as well, since he knew there was talk about showing him the Shozen Jutsu, which he was looking forward to. He looked at his alarm clock to see it was 11 p.m. He was about to shut his eyes before he heard his door open up slightly and could hear little steps coming towards the bed. He sat up and saw little Mina walking towards him wearing her little purple pajamas while holding her teddy in her arms. "Mina-chan, what are you doing in here? It's late and you should be in bed," he said as he saw her rub her eyes with her tiny hands before she looked at him and put her arms out. "Stay with Naru," she said, making him hesitate a little before he let it be. He smiled and went forward and picked his baby sister up. He lifted the covers and put himself and Mina under them, with Naruto leaning on his side while Mina was snuggled up next to him. Mina snuggled into her big brother's chest as Naruto wrapped his arms around her to keep her warm and safe. "Love you, Naru," she said, yawning before she immediately fell asleep. Naruto looked down at his baby sister and gently kissed her forehead. "Good night, Mina-chan. Sweet dreams." Just when Naruto fell asleep, Kushina passed his door to see that it was slightly open. When she took a peek in, her face softened and had a warm smile appear on her face when she saw her youngest cuddled up with her oldest. She tiptoed back before gently and silently closing the bedroom door and made her way to hers and Minato's room. Next day. "I am impressed, Naruto. You and your team sound like you had quite the experience for your Chunin exams. And you finished the second round in 3 of the 5 days is an impressive feat," Hiruzen said as Naruto finished recounting the first 2 rounds to Hiruzen, Tsunade and Shizune, who had welcomed him back and told him well done for his efforts in the Chunin exams and for making the 3rd round. "Now what do you know about your 2 opponents?" "Well, that's just it. I don't really know anything about them. I can only make guesses by their size and personalities. We did not have any chance to see any of each other's abilities." Tsunade pondered as she thought about it. "You said one was called Akatsuchi, who was from Iowa, and the other was called C, who was from Kumo. How big would you say they were?" "Very big. Bigger than other kids my age," he said, making them all nod. "In that case I can bet they will favor their physical strength and will end up lacking in speed. We can work on your speed and make you faster than ever. Plus I will be drilling you into taijutsu every day until you can stand anymore," she said, grinning, making Naruto grin back. "Plus I bet this boy from Iowa will use earth jutsus since they are very common for shinobi from Iowa, and the boy C from Kumo will favor lightning jutsus for the same reason," Shizune added, with Tsunade and Hiruzen nodding at the logic behind it. "So we work on his speed along with teaching him jutsu to counter earth and lightning. Wind we can do. But Naruto does not have a lightning affinity. Then we focus on water and earth techniques. Counter earth with earth and then use water against lightning. The two are both each other's enemy," Hiruzen said. "Plus I can work on my kenjutsu and fuinjutsu when I am on my own." They all nodded and made a quickly plan of what the training schedule for him would be like for the next month until it was time for him to leave for Suna again. Shizune would train him in the mornings until 1 Then an hour break for lunch until Tsunade would get him until 2 to 6. Then in the evening he could focus on his Kenjutsu and Fuinjutsu. Where are you up to in your Fuinjutsu? Hiruzen asked. Naruto grinned and got out a small book from the storage seal on his right wrist. I'm in the middle of level 4 at the moment, Gigi. I maybe have a couple of months, maybe a year at most until I am ready for level 5. He said. Hiruzen whistled, showing he was impressed. He would be surprised if this time in the next decade Naruto was already at his parents' level of Fuinjutsu or maybe even higher above them. Now that we covered, we can let Naruto know of the new techniques we will be teaching him. Shizune said as Hiruzen and Tsunade nodded in agreement. Really? What techniques? He asked, a little excited at the thought of learning something new. Shizune put her hand out and Naruto watched as a green aura wrapped around it, making Naruto realize what it was. The Shozen Jutsu. He said as she nodded. It's time we taught you how to heal yourself and others around you if the time ever comes. Since you have great control for your age, no doubt you will be able to pick it up quickly, though we may have a way of cutting that time down greatly. Shizune added as she motioned to Hiruzen, who then made the ram seal and created a clone next to him. The clone technique. But I already know the clone technique. Ah, but this is not like the illusion clones. Hiruzen said as he tapped on the clone's head, showing it was solid. These clones are very real but can be dispersed if we will it or they are hit hard enough. Plus any memory or action they have or do will go straight back to the original. Normally we would not show this to you since it is a B-ranked jutsu that requires a lot of chakra. However, since your chakra levels are already nearly the same size as Shizune and you have great chakra control, it means we can teach it to you early. So any of the jutsu I try and learn will be shortened because the clones will also learn it as well. I'm not surprised you figured it out. You are a smart cookie, Naru-chan. Tsunade said. But yes, that is what we are aiming for. We will be able to teach you a lot in just a month if you make a few clones to learn it at the same time. So for new techniques, Shizune-chan will teach me the Shozen Jutsu and Gigi will teach me the Kage Bushin no Jutsu. Then what are you going to teach me, Ba-chan? When he asked, Tsunade grinned while Shizune and Hiruzen looked a little panicked. No doubt they both knew what she was going to teach him. Are you sure you want to teach him that jutsu, Tsunade? He might not be ready for it just yet. Hiruzen asked almost in a pleading tone, but Tsunade waved it off. I have no doubt in my mind he will be able to learn it and master it to a degree in time for the Chunin exams. Besides, I have never taught this jutsu to anyone before and I think teaching it to Naru-chan would be the right thing to do. Naruto looked a little confused since he was unsure of which technique Tsunade was talking about, since she had a few techniques which she had never taught anyone, not even Shizune. Motioning him to follow her, Naruto was led outside by Tsunade, who had Hiruzen and Shizune following behind them, both looking a little pale. She stood in front of one of the Sarutobi clan training fields that the Sarutobi clan had, but Naruto swore he heard Hiruzen mumbling under his breath. This Naru-chan is what I will be teaching you. When people see you do this, they won't want to go anywhere near you. Grinning to herself, she raised her right fist high in the air for the three to see. Her right hand glowed bright blue and Naruto could see it getting denser before it suddenly disappeared around her hand. Huuuuuaahhhhh. Tsunade cried out as she brought her right fist down onto the ground and punched it with all her might. As soon as her fist hit, the entire training field cracked and began burst in a big explosion, making a big cloud of smoke and gravelly smoke to go through the area. Naruto, Hiruzen and Shizune managed to use their chakra to keep them in one place since some damage had been done even from behind Tsunade while the entire training field had been completely leveled. Whoa! Naruto said to himself. He had seen Tsunade use her super strength abilities many times, even in their spars together, but every time it made him look on in both amazement and a little bit of fear. Why, you're going to teach me that? Naruto said in amazement as Tsunade turned around to face him and grinned at him. I am, but remember Naruto, this technique of mine is very dangerous and therefore you must always be very careful, since one false move and all that chakra you build up in your hand could be released too early or too late and will result in your hand being blown to pieces. Naruto gulped. Also, you must not teach another person this technique without my approval. The last thing I want are too many shinobi knowing my trademark technique and it's somehow being used against us. Understand? She asked, and Naruto nodded his head. Naruto grinned happily. The three older shinobi smiled at his eagerness, but before they could push forward and begin the training, an Anbu appeared. Tsunade-sama, Sandaime-sama, Shizune-san, the Hokage has requested your presence in his office. He says it is of the utmost importance. The trio all looked in surprise and curiosity to what Minato was asking of them. We will be right there. Hiruzen answered as the Anbu disappeared. Well, Naruto-chan, you can stay here if you like and practice, or you can head on home and we can begin tomorrow. We best go see what your father needs. Hiruzen told the young blonde. Okay, Gigi, I'll see you all later. Naruto said as Shizune and Tsunade painted a kiss on his forehead each before they trio shunshined away. Naruto stood there and watched them go before a thought crossed his mind and took this as a good chance to do something without his parents or anyone else knowing about. I think I'll head home. I have something I want to learn and surprise everyone with at the Chunin exams. He thought to himself before grinning and running back home. Hokage office. Tsunade, Hiruzen and Shizune arrived in the Hokage office and were surprised to see Minato, Kushina, Jiraiya and Kakashi all standing there talking amongst them before seeing the new group arrive. I am glad you are all here. Jiraiya here has important information for us which the three of you need to hear. Minato said, though they could see he had a happy smile plastered on his face. Tsunade, Hiruzen and Shizune looked towards Jiraiya, who looked a bit more serious than he normally did as Kakashi and Kushina stood up to the side. The prophecy from the toads have changed and I now know for certain whom it speaks of. The prophecy speaks of two children born from two powerful parents that reside in a leaf will stage a great revolution in our world and will lead us to an era of peace. The three shot their eyebrows up again as Hiruzen spoke up. I have an idea of who you mean, but I would like you to say it anyway. Mito and Eiji, I know in my gut they are the children of prophecy. I am sure of it, as are Minato, Kushina and Kakashi. Okay, well, that's all fine and dandy. Tsunade interrupted as she stood with her hands on her hips. But why gather us all like this? Surely this is something you could have told us at a separate time. Since Eiji and Mito are the children of prophecy, we need them to be ready when the time is right. We know it early, but we think it is best to start their training early, to make them as strong as possible for when the times comes. Kushina said, which shocked the three. Kushina-sama, don't you think 5 is a little young? I mean, yes, the three of us began training Naruto when he was 5, but that was because of the Kyuubi attack. The twins won't have an incident like that during their youth, I imagine. As true as that may be, Shizune-san, the twins are special, as we have just found out, while Naruto is not. We know what we're doing. Jiraiya said as Kakashi nodded. Tsunade, Shizune and even Hiruzen were a little taken back by the comment from Jiraiya, but it disappeared since they knew just how wrong Jiraiya was. Kushina and Minato too were a little set back by the comment, however did not act on it. Anyway, with this information we will all be needed to begin training them as soon as possible. We want to create a charter for when we train them and what we will each teach them. Minato said. We are thinking I will teach them taijutsu, Kushina can focus on fuinjutsu and possibly kenjutsu, Kakashi will take stealth and trap making. Suand and Shizune, if you take medical ninjutsu then we can. No. Kakashi, Jiraiya, Kushina and Minato's head turned sharply to Tsunade, who gave them all a glare. Hiruzen and Shizune stood behind her and just had a motionless look on their faces. No. What do you mean no, Tsunade-sama? Kakashi asked. What do you think it means, Hatake? I am not training them. I have already promised to help Naruto with his training for the Chunin exams. We already have a schedule for him and the three of us have promised him. Jiraiya said, walking forward and touching her shoulder. The twins are more important. We can easily find someone to take over Naruto's training for the month. I'm sure the Gaki will understand. The twins need to come first in this. He said before he felt great pain in his hand as Tsunade grabbed it tightly, causing a few bones to crack a little. And when will you understand that I won't turn my back on him in his time of need? Unlike some, she said as she turned around and began walking out of the office. What do you mean by that? No one has turned their backs on Naru-chan. Kushina said, frowning a little at the statement, and felt more confusion when she heard Tsunade scoff. Tsunade left the room while Hiruzen and Shizune said their goodbyes before leaving along with the Senju woman. You alright, sensei? Minato asked as Jiraiya held his hand. I am surprised, Tsunade said. No. I thought she would have jumped at the chance to teach the twins. Don't worry about her. I will talk to her and I will show her that the twins need her more than Naruto does. We can have someone train the kid, right? He asked as Minato and Kushina nodded. They need to see that Mito and Eiji are going to need our help a lot more than Naruto ever will. It's for the greater good. Right, Kushina said. However, please don't say that Naruto is not special, Jiraiya. He is special and I don't want people saying he is not. All children are special. She glared at him a little while Minato sat back and breathed in deeply while Kakashi shrugged his shoulders and hoped out the window while pulling out his Ika Ika book. I know. Jiraiya said, quickly dismissing it, but not wanting to get on the redhead's bad side. Well, I will see you all tomorrow. I, however, have some research to do, he said perversely before shining away. That man will never change. Kushina said while Minato smiled a little at his sensei's antics. With Naruto. Good thing Tu-san and Ka-san are not here, otherwise they would probably not approve of me trying to learn what I need for that technique. Naruto said to himself as he quickly opened the door to his father's office and snuck in. Walking in, he quickly walked towards his father's desk and then bent down on his knees. From underneath the desk he hit it 3 times before a small cabinet suddenly opened up, revealing a couple of scrolls. He had found this secret cabinet by accident when he tripped over his own feet when he was 7 and noticed the small hidden cabinet. After finding out how to get in, which was easier than he imagined, and was surprised his father didn't put some kind of locking seal around it. Bit of a rookie mistake, but Tu-san probably never imagined someone would actually have the stones to do this. Naruto thought, smirking slightly. I don't think that Tu-san would be too happy with this, but he does owe me at least this much. As he looked through the scrolls he quickly saw the opens he was looking for. On the side of the scroll it had the rank of the jutsu Naruto wanted to learn. It was an A-rank jutsu that most would have said Naruto was nowhere near ready for, but he thought otherwise. From his right wrist he quickly poofed out a scroll and brush with a little bit of ink and quickly opened the scroll up and began copying the contents that was written down on them. Thanks to learning Fuinjutsu, his speed in writing was extremely fast and he quickly had all the contents of the scroll written down in less than a minute. His eyes traveled across the copy scroll he had just made, checking everything he needed was written on it. When he saw it he quickly sealed his equipment away along with the new scroll while placing his father jutsu scroll back in the cabinet and locked it up. He quickly got to his feet and left the office. When he closed the door behind him he had a small smirk on his face. It never ceased to amaze him that he was able to take jutsu from his mother and father's library anytime he wanted and never get caught. Heck, he even managed to do it one night when they were in the house. Then again, Shizune&San did say I have pretty impressive stealth skills. I could probably paint the Hokage monument in broad daylight if I wanted to and still get away with it. He knew his father and mother would probably be a bit displeased when they found out, but the reaction on their and everyone else's faces when he used said jutsu was going to be well worth it. After shaking his head, he left for him room when he quickly began study from his Fuinjutsu level 4 book. Next day with Anko. Anko panted a little as she ducked a swipe from Ibiki Morino, a man in his early 20s and who worked for the T&I division in Konoha. Since she arrived in Konoha, Ibiki had taken an interest in her and shown her a thing or two from time to time. That and Anko loved hanging around the T&I building. The torturing screams from there were music to her ears. To the side of the small field was Kurenai Yuhi, who was watching Anko fight Ibiki since the two had agreed to help ready Anko for the exams. I won't let Naruto and Itachi gap getting any bigger from me. I need to catch up. Especially if I want to him one day. She thought before she charged and engaged Ibiki in taijutsu while using her snakes to try and bite the hell out of him. The crowd roared and cheered as Naruto stood in the center on the Suna Chunin exam stadium. To his left stood Itachi and Anko, while on his right were the Iwa and Kumo teams. That's a lot of people, Naruto muttered as Anko and Itachi had to nod in agreement. Easily all of the Suna shinobi and most of its civilians were here in the stadium, along with a lot of foreign shinobi. Go Naruto! Naruto heard as he looked up in the stadium and went a little bit red before smiling as he saw Tsunade, Shizune and Hiruzen in the crowd. Tsunade had even made a giant flag that said Team Naruto and was waving it around. Instead of being embarrassed, he just laughed and gave Tsunade a thumbs up as grinned at him. Just beside them was Makoto and a few members of the Uchiha clan, which included Fugaku, Sasuke, Ria and Itachi's family member Shisui, who Naruto had met a couple of times before. Shisui was a lot like Itachi, as well as did not have that Uchiha stick in the. Little Ria was sitting on her mother's lap as she looked around happily at the sight of a new place while waving her little hands at her oldest brother, while Sasuke too had a big smile and cheered Itachi on. Over on the other side of the stadium was the Kumo and Iwa lot that were mostly quiet and stoic. Though Naruto noticed that a lot of the Iwa shinobi were staring at him either in curiosity or with a glare on their face. The glares they have made him they would want to jump from their seats and attack him. Then up in the Hokage box was his father, along with the Kazekage, Raikage and surprisingly the Tsuchikage. His father was busy conversing with the Kazekage and had Kakashi standing beside him as a bodyguard. The Kazekage had a tanned man with half his face covered by white cover. Beside the Tsuchikage, who was an old man that was very short, old man with a triangular beard and a mustache that has angular corners, a big red nose and thick eyebrows. The top of his head is completely bald, although he has long white hair on the lower half of his head, which is styled in a traditional Chanmage haircut. Over his shinobi coat he wore a mostly green and red coat. Beside him was a large man wearing the traditional red Iowa uniform but had no sleeve on his right arm, showing his larger arms. Then beside the Raikage was the same Jonin who accompanied him to Konoha just over a year ago. As Naruto waited for the proctor to begin the third exam, he knew that his own family was missing from the stands. Before they had left for Suna, Minato and Jiraiya had decided it would be best to keep the twins and Mina in Konoha since they did not want to risk assassination attempts. Kushina had readily agreed, which made Naruto angry. He wondered if his parents actually remembered about him at all. They had not shown any concern when he left for Suna over a month ago, and yet they were threatening over the twins. Instead of coming to Suna, they would instead watch from the Chunin Stadium in the Leaf, where they would be playing the Chunin exams on the big screen for those that had not gone to Suna to be able to watch it. His eyesight then turned towards the shinobi he and his team would have to go against, but noticed that the Iwa Kunoichi was glaring at him. Kurotsuchi, whose name he remembered outfit was the same as before, but her eyes were brimming with confidence. I bet she has gotten a lot stronger since her grandfather is the Tsuchikage after all, he thought as he looked back up at the cage box to see Onoki looking down at his granddaughter with a prideful smile before he turned to Naruto, gaze before narrowing a little and scoffed a little. Over in the stands, Suan, who was keeping close eye on Naruto, saw where his gaze was going. San noticed Onoki looking at him. She let a growl build up in her throat, promising pain to Onoki if he tried anything during the exams. Next to him, Anko let her eyebrows shoot up a little. "You okay, Naruto?" Anko asked as she tapped her friends on the elbow since she saw his frown on his face. Yeah, I'm fine. Just thinking that all," he said, looking away from the stands and just focusing on the ground in front of him. "Always dangerous," she said, snickering a little while Naruto knocked her a little with his hip, making her almost trip. He got a glare in return. Konoha. Kushina sat in the cage box with many of clan heads as they waited and watched the Chunin exams, wondering how well Makoto's team was going to do since she had bragged that her team was definitely going to make Chunin first time around. It earned a lot of scoffs, thinking it was ridiculous, but were curious nonetheless. Kushina sat with Mina on her lap, who was giggling happily as she saw her brother on the big screen. If it was not for the eyes, he would be a carbon copy of Minato, Honora said as her daughter Ino sat by her feet, happily playing with Mito and the other clan children. Suna. From the center of the arena, a small smoke cloud appeared and got quickly swept away. Pakura arrived and stood in the arena, drawing attention to herself as her being there signaled the matches were about to begin. "Good luck, guys," Naruto whispered. "You too," both Itachi and Anko said to him before they paid close attention as the Kazekage stood up from his seat and began to speak as his voice projected through the arena. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the third part of the Chunin exams. I welcome everyone who is from the village of Konoha, Iwagakure and Kumogakure, and hope you are enjoying your stay here in Suna. Watch as these 8 young genin will show the world why they are ready to advance into becoming Chunin of their village. Pakura, I leave the rest to you." Pakura nodded towards her Kazekage before looking at the 8 genin. "If any of you want to drop out now, then now is the time to do so," she said as everyone watched as no one moved. "In that case, would everyone except for Anko Mitsurashi of Konoha and Rado Kuroshini of Kumo please leave the field and go to the competitor's box," she said. "Kick some, Anko," Naruto said as Anko grinned at him, knowing that kicking was exactly what she had in mind. Naruto and Itachi left the arena and stood next to one another as they watched their friend and teammate. "So how do you think she will do?" Itachi asked, watching as Anko took up her position, as did the Kumo shinobi. Naruto grinned at the question. "Anko is going to win, no questions asked. She has been working her butt off this last week, so there is no way she would lose to this guy. On the field, you ready to lose, Leaf Girl?" Rado asked as he cracked his neck and shuffled his arms around. Anko stood calmly and firmly as she stared at her opponent before she licked her lips a little, showing her anticipation for the match. Pakura stood up to the side as she looked between the two. She raised an arm which made the stadium fall quiet before she swung down. "Hajime." As soon as the word was said, Rado shot forward and pulled a sword from its sheath on his back and swung down at her. Anko saw it and jumped backwards a few meters. Rado did not stop since he quickly jumped forwards and began trying to strike Anko with his blade. He was swinging in a mad frenzy, but Anko though was easily dodging the strikes. "Raiden. Inazuma Zeppin," he said as he threw his hand forward to try and grab Anko's shoulder and sent currents of lightning going through her body. Anko however cawaramide away and reappeared 10 meters behind him, leaving a log in her previous spot. As she stood there she bent down a little, traced her thumb over the ground, something Rado did not take much notice of while the shinobi in the stands did. Interesting, Hiruzen thought as he watched Anko. Rado growled loudly and breathed hard as Anko danced on the spot a little. Rado once again went forward a bit, this time tried to hit her with his taijutsu, which by the way he was throwing punches towards her, though it looked similar to an academy-style taijutsu. His punches and kicks were a little sloppy and Anko easily maneuvered out of the way before landing once again 10 meters away from him. "Damn it, stop dodging and running away, you coward," he said to Anko before he felt something slice his cheek all of a sudden and felt a warm trickle going down it. A cut formed on his cheek and behind him was a kunai. Anko blurred from her spot in front of him and appeared behind him and pinned his arms behind his body. "Who is the coward, you snot?" she said as she licked a small trail of blood from his cheek, which freaked Rado out. She pushed him in front of her and with great speed and precision threw senbons toward Rado. "Senbons?" He laughed as he pulled them out. "How pathetic," he said, throwing them away before noticing his arms suddenly went limp. A look of horror and surprise appeared on his face when his other arm suddenly went as well. "My arms. What did you do?" "Those pathetic senbons, as you called them, were lost in poison," she said, making Rado's eyes go wide like saucers. "Don't worry, it's not harmful, but it will make your body go numb and limp for a few hours. Don't worry though, you should be fine by the end of the day. However," she said as a wicked grin appeared on her face, "it means you are now all ripe for the taking." She makes a hand sign and out of the ground a large snake bigger than Rado comes out of the earth and wraps around the numbed boy, who now looks ready to drop to the ground in fear. "Now you can either surrender or I could have my friend have you as a snack. He has not been fed in a few days, so he is mighty hungry," she said, patting its head before the snake hissed loudly at Rado. Everyone watched as the snake opened its jaws and elongated its fangs towards him. Just as the snake's mouth was about to devour him whole, Rado called out, "I give up. I surrender." "Darn, that takes the fun out of things," Anko said before shrugging as she called off the giant snake and watched as Rado dropped to the ground like a sack of potatoes. Pakura, who was standing a little to the side, smirked a little before holding up her hand. "The winner of the match is Anko Mitsurashi of Konoha." When she spoke, the audience clapped while those from Konoha cheered. Pakura optioned for a stretcher to come onto the field and they quickly took Rado away. "That girl is pretty good. She might have a bright future in the Leaf," Hiruzen said. "Though I wonder where she learned to use poisons." Both Hiruzen and Suan glanced over towards Shizune, who shuffled a little in her seat before returning to the field. Up in the Hokage box, the Raikage grumbled a little while Onoki looked at the girl curiously. "How is it that she has the snake contract?" he asked. "I'm not at liberty to say that," Minato said firmly as Kakashi eyed the older Kage while the guard of Onoki's looked in Kakashi's. "I would not bother asking Tsuchikage. When it comes to sharing information, don't expect to get anything back from him or that village of his." Minato glared a little from his seat while the two Kages huffed. "Not surprising. The boy always was full of himself," Onoki muttered while Kakashi glared at him before Onoki glared at Kakashi. "Boy, if you don't stop glaring at me, you will be joining your father in the afterlife," he threatened as Minato put his hand on Kakashi's shoulder as things went quiet in the Hokage box. "Good job out there, Anko. You showed him who was boss," Naruto said as Anko shrugged. "I did what I could," she said before looking at Itachi. "You better win your match because I will be waiting for you in the next round," she said as Itachi nodded and began walking onto the field. Itachi arrived on the field as he looked across from his opponent, Deidara of Iwa. The blonde Iowa shinobi was grinning as his hands were very close to a pouch on his side. Our Uchiha-san, are you ready to behold my art? It is quite a bang, he said as Itachi furrowed his brow. Art. Art is fast, something that happens in an instant. It's so quick most don't even see it. Except for me, that is. It's art, it's beautiful. It would be great to defeat you, Uchiha-san. My sensei the Tsuchikage will be pleased with me knowing I defeated someone of the famed Uchiha clan. After speaking, many looked at him in surprise at that he was trained by Onoki. Some of the Uchiha members including Makoto looked a little worried while Fugaku and the others showed no emotion. In the cage box the other cages looked at Onoki in surprise since Onoki had never shown any interest in taking on a student before other than those in his family. So they wondered what was so special about this one boy. A student of the Tsuchikage. He is going to be good then, Naruto said as Anko nodded in agreement. Pakura's voice broke everyone out of their thoughts as she raised her hands. She looked towards the two who both nodded at her. She nodded back before calling out, Hajime. Immediately both Itachi and Deidara jumped back from each other to the other side of the field. Naruto fingered his shurikens in his pocket while keeping his eyes plastered on Deidara while Deidara and put his hand in the pouch and took out a lump of white clay. Everyone looked in curiosity at what H was going to as well as Itachi before everyone had a slightly grossed out look when they saw a hand appear on his hand with a tongue sticking out of it. It ate the clay and began to munching on it. I think I lost my appetite, Ka-chan, Sasuke said looking a little green as did Ria who was pouting and waving her arms at the action, obviously not impressed. Deidara grinned before he noticed that Itachi's eyes and become Sharingan and were spinning around. He looked away and tried to avoid eye contact since he had been told that an Uchiha could easily put a genjutsu on someone by just looking at them. Your eye tricks won't work on me, he said as Itachi then threw a flurry of shurikens. Doden. Doryuheiki, Deidara called as he made the hand signs while his right hand was still munching on the clay. The wall went U and stopped the shurikens, but Deidara was surprised to see Itachi quickly appear on top of the wall. Kaden. Gokakyu no Jutsu, a torrent of fire went towards Deidara and poured over Deidara much to everyone's surprise and a few people's cries. Itachi looked a little surprised, but when the fire disappeared he and everyone went all wide-eyed when they saw Deidara begin to melt away. A clone, Itachi thought before he suddenly heard scurrying come from beneath him. He looked down to see little spiders made of clay walk towards him. It seemed you fell into the trap, Deidara said appearing a distance behind him and made a hand sign. Katsu. When he spoke the spiders lit up and to everyone's surprise exploded. Itachi, Anko shouted out having seen her friend in the center of the explosion though Naruto stayed looking calm. Though she and many other were relieved when they saw a log was now where Itachi is standing. Not bad, Itachi said now appearing behind Deidara with a kunai to the back of his neck. When did you make the clone? I see the Uchiha live up to their name. I would be disappointed if you did not. And to answer the question when the earth wall went up. But you Uchihas really should pay more attention behind you, Deidara called as Itachi looked behind to find more clay spiders appearing and jumping towards him and trying to latch onto him. Itachi jumped up high towards the top of the wall. Kaden. Ruka no Jutsu. A giant head of a dragon flew towards the clay burning and melting most of them. When the spiders disappeared Itachi was surprised to see owls made of clay now flying towards him. Frowning he made a new set of hand signs. Raiden. Raiko Senbon no Jutsu. A range of lightning-made senbons formed in front of him and he threw them towards the clay-made owls. Since when does Itachi know lightning jutsu? Anko asked since she was unaware he even knew Ne light jutsu since he was mostly fire-based like she was. Must have picked it up during his training, Naruto answered. The lightning made Senbons hit the owls and they all went tumbling down. As Itachi looked toward Deidara, he saw a grin was plastered on his face. "You're in range," Deidara said as from the corner of Itachi's eye he noticed a small clay bird appear in front of him. His eyes went wide and jumped back as much as he could but saw that he was just too close. Deidara looked victorious as the tongues in his hands swayed around in every direction. "Now you know that art is an explosion." The clay bird exploded right by Itachi, caused a small shock wave to hit the arena and throw a couple off their feet. The walls that it was close to now had a big indent and cracks in it. Coming out of the smoke cloud, Itachi jumped out, all limbs still intact but had burn on his right hand and leg along with some blood going down the right side of his face. However, as soon as he landed, a clay-made centipede came out of the ground and wrapped around. It held on tightly as Deidara appeared in front of him with a grin on his face as he held up the hand sign for the explosions. "Any last words, Uchiha? I would hate to make a mess," Deidara said. He waited for Itachi to say something, but instead Itachi said no words but instead had a small grin on his face. The grin alone made rage boil inside Deidara, wondering what Itachi had to grin about. He was about to ask what he was grinning at, but just as he got close to Itachi, the Uchiha suddenly disappeared in a flock of crows. "I would not make that hand sign if I were you," Itachi's voice said before Deidara suddenly felt something clamp around him. He looked down and was shocked to see the clay centipede wrapped around him instead of Itachi. "What? I don't understand," he said as Itachi appeared in front of him with no injuries on him anymore, and he noticed Itachi's Sharingan eyes were spinning. "A genjutsu? You have had me in a genjutsu. When did you put it on?" "The moment you first looked in my eyes at the beginning of the match," he said as everything around the suddenly broke away like glass, revealing the real audience, who looked a little surprised. There was a grinning Uchiha clan as well as a smiling Naruto and Anko, all looking at him. Pakura walked over to the two boys, impressed at the control Itachi had throughout the entire match, and called the match. The winner is Itachi Uchiha from Konoha. Many cheered as the Uchiha as Deidara slowly made his way of the field with his head low. Never had he felt this humiliated before. He saw the Tsuchikage shaking his head while his Iwa partners gave him some sympathy. Though he looked back at Itachi with hate-filled eyes, silently swearing he would make Itachi pay. "That my boy. That my Itachi-kun," Makoto called out as Sasuke and Ria joined in while Fugaku tried to scold his wife for not acting proper, but she just waved him off. Itachi left the field a little red-faced since his mother was shouting how well her little boy did. He saw the grins on his teammate's face. "Very nice, Mr. Uchiha, winning with a genjutsu. How very Uchiha of you," Anko said, patting his shoulder. "Though you better now, it will take more than a genjutsu to make me down," she said. "I would expect nothing less, Anko," he called back as the next match was announced and they watched as the other Kumo shinobi and the Iwa girl made their way onto the field. "So who do you think will win this one?" Anko asked as they all scanned the two opponents. "The girl," Naruto said, getting looks from his two teammates. "She is strong, I know that much. She is the granddaughter of the Tsuchikage, therefore no doubt he will have a hand in her training. Though unlike Deidara, I don't think a genjutsu will be enough to take her out." He did not know how right he was. The match did not last very long. The Kumo nin had changed like some academy student while Kurotsuchi had remained calm. She quickly batted him away with her taijutsu, which was recognized as the rock style the Iwa shinobi were known for using. She then used a couple of C and B ranked earth jutsus which quickly squashed any chance of the Kumo nin winning. She trapped him in earth before knocking his lights out with swift and powerful punches. Once it was over, Kurotsuchi was standing there with a victorious smile on her face, hardly scratched or worn out, while the Kumo nin was out cold and bloodied on the ground. Pakura quickly called it. Kurotsuchi walked proudly back to the finalists' box. She looked towards Naruto briefly and gave him a look as if saying to him, try and beat that. Oh, it's on. Naruto thought, smirking before he heard his name being called along with the two others he would have to battle. As he, Akatsuchi and C walked onto the field, they all got a round of cheer from their respective villages. Tsunade, Shizune and Hiruzen cheered, Tsunade being the loudest, telling Naruto to kick some serious. While back in Konohamato, Eiji and Mina all cheered and clapped when they saw their big brother on the big screen. Kushina clapped lightly, smiling as she watched Naruto's match. In the cage box, all cage and bodyguards looked down curiously at the Naruto, no doubt wanting to see if he was anything like his parents and to see just how powerful he was. They had seen firsthand how his two teammates had fought. Now though, it was time for Naruto to shine. The three stood in a triangle-like formation and Pakura was just outside the triangle. As he stood there, he saw Akatsuchi and C looked at each other and nod before turning towards him. He, along with many others, saw it and inwardly cursed. Though Naruto had stayed perfectly calm and now prepared himself. His hand went behind his back and sneakily made a hand sign. Only Hiruzen and Tsunade saw it and inwardly smirked. Hajime, Pakura called out, and almost immediately Akatsuchi and C turned towards him and charged. Naruto watched them come towards him and felt their chakra and their movements from it. Akatsuchi readied to punch him from the top while C punched him from the bottom. When they connected, to everyone's surprise, Naruto had poofed out of existence. Cage Bushins. The shinobi all thought when they saw it, while Minato, who was watching closely, had his eyes widen a little. Naruto knows shadow clones. Wonder where he go? Akatsuchi said, putting his finger to his lips and scratching his head. C tried to dance him about, but before he could, a pair of arms shot out from the ground and brought him down into the ground. Doden. Shinju Zanshu no Jutsu. Naruto whispered as C was pulled down until only his head was left sticking out. When he shot out of the ground, Akatsuchi eyed him and engaged him in taijutsu. As he swung, Naruto saw that his suspicions about him were right, in that Akatsuchi was focusing more on power and his speed was not so great. Meaning Naruto was easily dodging all the kicks and swings as well as landing a few blows of his own on Akatsuchi. He focuses on the side of where his kidney would be. He mentally thanked Shizune for the anatomy lessons. Akatsuchi grunted as Naruto pushed the big genin away while C had managed to dig himself out. He made a few hand signs and shouted, Raiden! Dendo Underi! Small waves of lightning shot out from C and went towards Naruto. Naruto saw them and made his own hand seals. Doden! Tsuchi no Yae! The ground around him shot up and hoisted him into the air, dodging the waves of lightning. In doing so, Akatsuchi jumped back before he pumped chakra into his feet and pushed towards Naruto at great speed. Doden! Goramu no Te! Clumps of rocks formed around Akatsuchi's hands and increased its physical capabilities. He swung down at Naruto, who jumped away and landed on the side of one of the walls. The spot he was standing on was reduced to rubble from the Iwa ninja. Naruto jumped down from the wall and landed back on the ground. C and Akatsuchi appeared in front of him. Both went forward and engaged him in taijutsu, doing their best to once again try and hit him. But again Naruto's speed was greater than both and was dodging them gracefully and almost effortlessly. Plus it did not help that Akatsuchi and C kept bumping into one another. Stop getting in the way, Iwa idiot. I trying, Mr. Kumo boy. You two don't make a very good pairing, you know that, Naruto said before he sent a strong kick to C, which threw him a couple of meters away, while Akatsuchi got kicked in the guy and then kneed in the face, which sent him staggering back. He had felt a crunch, so Naruto might have just broke Akatsuchi's giant nose. Sweden. Tepoutum, he said as glomps of water shot out and toward C and Akatsuchi. A few of the water shots hit the duo as the two knocked into each other and stumbled a little. In retaliation, they threw kunai and shuriken towards Naruto. Instead of jumping out of the way, Naruto stood there calmly before he quickly pulled out the Shisui and deflected them all with the black blade. When he did, many in the audience, civilian and shinobi alike, marveled at the blade. Those in cage box looked at it curiously, even Minato. He had only seen the sword in its sheathed state, never actually taken out before. This was the first he and many other had seen a black blade. Many of the shinobis from other villages licked their lips in the thought of having the sword, but froze when they had Ki hit them and saw Tsunade glaring at those who she knew had those stealing thoughts. In Konoha, Kushina too looked at it with wide eyes. Why have I never seen that blade before? Surely I would have noticed that sword at home, wouldn't I? Little unfair, isn't it, that you two team up? Naruto spoke, getting the two out of their surprise, said as he was curious to why they teamed up. It does not matter. You're the son of the Flash and most hate your very existence. Kumo hates your mother and Iwa hates your father. Therefore both extremely hate you, she said. From their spots in the cage box and back in Konoha, both Minato and Kushina frowned, while many of the Leaf shinobi shook theirs and argued they would not let anything happen to one of their shinobis. Well, if that's the case, then I guess I should start getting serious then, huh? He said, surprising most who were listening as he gripped the Shisui, which was still sheathed. You know, my Ba-chan has always said that I have the devil's luck since her completely s, he said, making Tsunade shake her fist at him from the crowd, making a few people laugh. So I think I can end this soon, since watching you two fumble over each other leaves little to be desired, he said, as well as thinking, I can end this in one move. Guess it's time that I finally used it. His fingers traced along the hilt of his resheathed blade. You think so? Well, I will show you, she declared, forgetting about the teamwork with Akatsuchi. In his hands 8 kunai appeared with paper bombs wrapped around them as he readied to throw them. Next to him, Akatsuchi made hand signs before slamming on the ground. Doden. Goramu no Jutsu. A big hand shot out of the ground in front of him, and the rock body of a person 3 times the size of a normal person appeared out and gave a loud roar. Impressive. Now it's my turn, he said before putting his hand on the hilt of Shisui and closing his eyes, much to the surprise of many. Naruto waited for the right moment as he felt the chakra of his opponents and felt one was angry and the other was weirdly curious and kinda happy even. He pushed chakra to his feet, getting ready to push up and do so at a great speed. Here he goes, Hiruzen said, alerting the people around him and now watching intently at what would happen. I will show you, she declared as he threw the paper-bombed kunai towards Naruto, who still stood still. Akatsuchi also sent his golem forwards, which had its hand outstretched. Naruto waited and waited for the right moment as the attacks got closer and heard a few people tell him to get out of the way. Just as they got close, his eyes snapped open and at great speed pushed off from his spot. It all happened in a blur as Naruto was standing in one spot 1 second and then the next he was behind Akatsuchi and C. Many were surprised to see where Naruto suddenly stood with his sword outstretched. All they heard for that few seconds were what sounded like tearing the whipping of wind. They had no idea it was actually Naruto swinging his blade. Those Jonin level and above all saw him move and his actions and were looking at him in a surprised state, none realizing a genin and potential chunin could move so fast at his age. The Kanayan missed their target and gone off at the other side of the field, not hurting anyone, while the golem and the contestants just stood there. Slowly Naruto began to put his blade away back in its sheath. The whole field was complete quiet as they heard him mutter his Tekku Niue. Itoryu ei, Shishi Sunsun. He then fully sheathed the blade, making the clink sound echo through the arena. When he did, everyone watched as the golem suddenly fell to pieces and C and Akatsuchi had blood spurt from their chests as they suddenly fell down to the ground. No one moved as they were all a little wide-eyed while Hiruzen, Tsunade, Shizune, Makoto, Itachi and Enko stood there with big smiles on their faces. Pakura, who was off to the side, shook herself out of her daze and smirked a little before raising her hand. The winner of the match is Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze. As soon as she said his name was, the Konoha side of the audience burst into applause as they stood up and cheered his name and clapped. "That's my Naru-chan," Tsunade shouted out as Shizune clapped enthusiastically. "That's my student," Makoto shouted out as she and her kids all cheered for him too. Back in Konoha Mito, Eiji and Mina were all on their feet cheering loudly for their big brother, though Mina was more like just clapping rather loudly and kicking her legs in front of her. While everyone cheered, just two people did not clap. Not because they were not impressed, but because they were shocked at what they saw. Both Minato and Kushina looked at their son with one thought in their minds. "Naru-chan, how or when did you get so strong?" After the first round of the third task had finished, everyone was given 30 minutes to take a rest and gather their bearings before they moved on to the second round and onto their next fights. Makoto, Tsunade, Hiruzen and Shizune had come down from their spots in the crowds and wanted to see how the trio were doing and to make sure they had no major injuries, despite already knowing they were all perfectly fine. The adults praised each one of them, especially Naruto, since his sword technique had apparently been the talk of the crowd since he used it. Watching him take down two shinobis and a big rock golem in a single move was something to be impressed with. "That was a great first round, Naruto-kun. You are doing very well and you won it with revealing little of your strengths," Hiruzen said, greatly impressed with his surrogate grandson and student's performance. "Well, deception is a ninja's main skill. Though I get the feeling the next fight with Kurotsuchi is going to a lot tougher. I'm going to have to bring out a few of my tougher cards and put them into play. Well, just know you have our full support. You will show that Iwa Kunoichi who is the boss around here," Tsunade said, pumping her fist in the air, making Naruto grin. Up in the cage box, Minato wanted to go down and speak with Naruto since what he saw amazed him. He did not realize Naruto was so far along in his shinobi training. In fact, he made that match almost look too easy. Why am I only beginning to notice it now? What have I been doing not to notice how accomplished Naruto is becoming as a shinobi? He knew Makoto would be a good fit for him as a sensei, since Makoto was a well-rounded shinobi that was a sort of jack of trades in each of the three main shinobi fields. He did ask Kakashi, since Kakashi had become quite the famous shinobi and could be a good influence and good sensei, but Kakashi turned it down, saying he did not have the time to play sensei. "Once the Chunin exams are over, maybe I should test Naruto myself. Maybe he took more after me in terms of being a shinobi." Back in Konoha though, Kushina was thinking the same thing. She was a kenjutsu master and what she saw from Naruto with that attack was very impressive. What looked like a single strike was actually multiple strikes that had been struck at such a fast speed you had to watch carefully to even see it. She was currently standing outside of the Konoha Stadium bathrooms as she waited for the twins to finish making their business so they could go back and not miss any of the matches. Mina was huddled next to her, holding on to her skirt, looking around the room since it was a new place. "I wonder who taught him and why did he not come to me for training in kenjutsu? Or did he ask me? Did he ask me and did I just brush him off?" She thought, since she was wondering to what sort of shinobi training she had actually provided her son. Once Naruto got back, she too knew that she would have to talk with Naruto about where he got his skill set from. Back in the Suna Stadium, the waiting bell signaled, making everyone know that it was time for the second round to begin. Naruto, Itachi and Anko went back to the box where they already found Kurotsuchi waiting for them. She looked over at them when they came in as well and looked Naruto over before turning away. "Why does she keep doing that? Anko asked since Kurotsuchi had kept glancing at Naruto and turning away quite a number of times. No idea. Maybe she is trying to figure me out. Strengths, weaknesses, what makes me tick, you know, that sort of thing. That could be it. She does strike me as more intelligent than her teammates and the others in the competition. You will have to watch her closely. She could be a wild card. Itachi muttered as Naruto nodded, thinking the same thing. As they entered the box, Pakura reappeared on the fields. The second round to the third part of the Chunin exams will begin now. Would Anko Mitsurushi and Itachi Uchiha of the Leaf Village please come down onto the field? The crowd cheered as the two genin names were announced, and they all knew that for the earlier performances that this match was going to be a good one. Alright guys, you are up. Don't disappoint, Naruto said as Anko and Itachi walked onto the field side by side. Once they were in the center of the field, Itachi kept walking a small distance before he stopped and turned around to face Anko. In the stands, Makoto took a deep breath. Though she knew deep down that Itachi would likely win between the two, she knew Anko was not going to give up easily and was going to give him a run for his money. On the field, the two teammates and friends looked at each other. Good luck, Anko-san, Itachi said as he smiled at her. Anko returned it. You too, Itachi. The next match is about to begin. Are you both ready? Pakura asked as both Itachi and Anko nodded and both readied in their respective stances. Pakura looked between them before swinging her arm down. Hajime. When the word was said, Itachi and Anko pushed back a little, both with their hands in their pouches, and as quick as lightning began storming one another with shurikens. None made it past the collision center as the shurikens all found themselves getting rebounded of the other's shurikens and were littering the ground as well as the wall. A few of the shinobis even had to duck their heads to avoid getting a shuriken stuck in their heads. On the field, after a minute of throwing shuriken at one another, they eventually stopped, but not before Anko put her hands on the ground with blood on the edges of her fingertips. Kuchio's no jutsu, she said as a puff of smoke appeared and a long snake appeared out of it. The snake saw Itachi and quickly slithered over to him and began to strike at him with quick and precise strike with its mouth as its fangs were bearing out as well as its tongue. Each time it struck, Itachi efficiently dodged its strikes and managed to land a few strikes onto the snake before he pushed himself away and jumped on the wall. The snake quickly followed after him and did its best to catch up to him, but Itachi had showed that he too had trained in his speed as he easily outmaneuvered the big snake. He then jumped in the air away from the wall and where the snake was and made hand signs. Kaden. Haikui no jutsu, he said as black ash and fire poured out of his mouth and engulfed the snake, making it hiss in pain. That's going to hurt, Naruto muttered as many in the crowd thought the same thing. They would not want to be that snake right now. When the ash cloud disappeared, the snake was still there, but its skin was burnt in multiple places. I am going to be SSSSSSS shedding for weeks SSSSS, the snake hissed out before it disappeared in a cloud of smoke. When Itachi landed on the ground, Anko came up behind him and pulled a kunai over his neck. You should remember to watch your back, she said as Itachi smiled at her. I could tell you the same thing. Anko's eyes winded when Itachi suddenly disappeared in a murder of crows and could hear something soaring through the air and coming towards her. She turned around in time to see kunai heading towards her. Her eyes counted how many there were and in retaliation threw the same amount of shuriken. Her shuriken collided with Itachi's and cancelled them out. As she did, Itachi appeared in front of her, jumped over her shoulder, but as he was in the air grabbed her shoulder. He then landed and using his strength threw her across the field with a lot of force. Anko couldn't dodge in time as she slammed into the walls of the stadium, wincing a little as she rubbed her lower back. I think I felt something crack, she thought as she shakily stood up, though her lower back felt like it was on fire. I have to tough this out now. She's hurt. Naruto whispered to himself as Tsunade and Shizune made the same decision. Anko made a few hand signs and Itachi, who had his Sharingan active, copied the movements. Kaden. Enden no Jutsu. They both said as two giant fireballs blew out of their mouth and collided with one another, making a shockwave of heat hit the closer audience members. Fugaku meanwhile turned to his wife. That is an Uchiha clan jutsu. Why does someone who is not an Uchiha know it? He asked as Makoto shrugged at her husband's question. Itachi must have shown her it. She does have a fire affinity, so it would be a helpful jutsu to know. Fugaku obviously was not satisfied with the answer but had to accept it since Makoto had now turned back to the match at hand. Kaden. Hai no jutsu shi aim. Anko said as she shot fire into the air, and everyone watched as the fire looked as if it began to break apart into multiple little pieces and rain down on the field. Itachi responded by calling out, Doden, Doaki no Jutsu, as a wall of earth suddenly erected up in front of him and blocked the rain. Doden, since when do you know Doden? Anko asked. I asked Naruto to show me a Doden that would be handy for defense, though in return I had to promise him that I would show him a Kaden Jutsu at some point in the future. No fair, she whined, pouting before she went into her pack and grabbed a few Senbons. Itachi recognized them as the Senbons she used in her previous match that had some kind of venom on them. Can't get hit by those, he thought as Anko made her way towards him with 3 Senbons gripped in each of her hands. She got closer towards him and swung at him, but Itachi easily maneuvered out of the way. When she did though, Itachi swept her feet and went to hit her in the gut but noticed his legs went through her. An illusion, he thought to himself as he turned around to see a Senbon implanted in his shoulder. Sometimes you have to go back to basics, right? Anko said as Itachi chuckled. Very true, and it seems your poison managed to get me. I am guessing my arm will be out of commission for a little while. He asked as she nodded. Then I guess I better get rid of it before it spread too far. He said. As he said that, he grabbed a kunai with his other hand and drove it into the wound where the Senbon went in, effectively getting the poison out of his system. Many in the audience were surprised to see him do such an act, but the shinobi saw it as dedication since not many would willingly injure themselves in order to get rid of the poison. That should be enough, he said before he quickly hit Anko in her stomach as she looked at him in surprise at what he had just done. Anko hit the ground but quickly got up. Sanejishu, she said as 2 snakes shot out of her sleeve and headed straight towards Itachi. To her surprise they hit, but a moment later a poof was heard and a log was now in his place. You're not the only one who can go back to basics, he said as Anko turned around to try and stop him but instead felt a thud hit the back of neck. Her eyes went dreary and her vision went black before she collapsed to the ground, knocked out. Itachi looked towards Pakura, who nodded. The winner of the match is Itachi Uchiha of Konoha. The crowd cheered and clapped at the 2 genin who gave them another good performance as Itachi's siblings once again cheered loudly for their big brother. Itachi looked down at Anko and quickly picked her and carried her over to the medic bay where they would take a quickly look over her and check her vitals were all fine. You did good, Anko-san. You pushed me quite a bit. I look forward to any future battles we should have, he said as he patted his friend's shoulders before he made his way back the contestants' box. In the stands, Makoto gave both her son and her female student a loud round of applause, knowing that they both deserved it and that she was very proud of both of them. Good fight. Anko put you through the ringer, he said as Itachi winced a little from the cut on his shoulder. Yes, well, as tough as that was, it is now your turn to fight against some feminine fury, he said as they looked over to see Kurotsuchi move onto the field. Looks like it is my turn again, Naruto said as he cracked his shoulders and followed after. When they both walked onto the field, the Konoha and the Iowa side all erupted into cheers, no doubt having been waiting to see this match happen for some time. It was essentially the family of Iowa versus the family of Konoha. And it was time to see which one was better. Naruto and Kurotsuchi stood apart from one another as the two looked across from one another. Naruto raised an eyebrow at her calm demeanor and noticed she was not listening to the shouting of the crowds. "You're different from the rest," he said as Kurotsuchi raised an eyebrow. "Different how? For starters, you are not insulting me because of who I'm related to. I know my dad can be a nut times, but you don't need to take it out on me," he said as many in the crowd snickered at his words. In the Hokage box, Minato coughed and looked a little uncomfortable as the other cages laughed in their seats, no doubt finding it funny that the man's son called him what they all thought he was. "Not that it's any of your business, but I don't hold that petty grudge that others in Iowa carry. While I don't really like you all the same, I don't hold a grudge over what happened in the Third War. It was war and casualties and deaths were bound to happen. Even though I agree, your dad can be an..." Now Minato just wanted to crawl away as the cages laughed even harder, as did Tsunade, Shizune and others in their section. "What about those times where you just looked at me? Like you hated me, just observing you, wanting to see what your strengths were, any weak points, what made you tick? And did you get any answers?" he asked as Kurotsuchi smirked at him. "Well, I guess you will just have to find out," she said, making Naruto back in return. "Okay, love birds, if you two are done flirting with each other," Pakura said as Naruto and Kurotsuchi blushed a little and looked the other way, drawing a few laughs from everyone. "Then we can begin this match." They both nodded and got in their respective stances. "Hajime. Doden. Daichi no Supaiku," Kurotsuchi called as a massive spike of earth shot out of the ground towards Naruto. Naruto jumped back 10 meters and missed the spike as he unsheathed the Shisui. Kurotsuchi went forward with a kunai in each hand and began swiping at Naruto, who easily defended with the Shisui. Sparks flew from the kunai and blade when they connected with one another. Kurotsuchi used her slim body and used her flexibility to perform a couple of very well agile and well-balanced moves as she tried to hit him in some of his vital spots. One of her kunais went for the jugular, showing Naruto just how serious she was being. He moved his head back and just felt the graze of the tip of the kunai hit his throat. In response, he swept her legs with a vicious kick, but Kurotsuchi quickly jumped in the air before she unleashed a kick of her own. He caught the kick and threw her over his shoulder, but she easily rolled with the throw. "Doden. Doro no Gazo," she said as glomps on mud shot out of her mouth and rocketing towards Naruto. "Futon. Daitapa," he said as he took a deep breath and forced a large swirl of wind out of his mouth. The wind rushed forward and knocked into the mud shots, sweeping them away or destroying the others. "Futon. Doden and Suiten Jutsu," Kushina thought as she watched the screen of her son fighting the Iowa Kunoichi. "How does he have 3 elements? He should have taken after either myself or Minato, yet he has inherited both along with another." Back on the field, Naruto defended from a few quick strikes from Kurotsuchi, though he was too fast and managed to block each strike and counter with his own, though she would block and do the same. Eventually her kunai and Naruto's sword locked onto each other and began fighting for dominance. When they entered a stalemate, Naruto used his superior physical strength and pushed her back and sent her flying back a couple of meters. So he is not all show. He has physical strength too, she thought. Kurotsuchi easily back-flipped and landed on her feet. "Kage Bushin no Jutsu," Naruto called as 3 shadow clones shot forward and began attacking Kurotsuchi as Naruto placed a hand on his blade's hilt. "He's going for it again," Hiruzen said as Suon nodded. "It's early for him to be going for it again." When he watched the clones get her in the right spot, charged. "Itoryu. Shishi Sunsun," he said as he suddenly shot forward and went to slash Kurotsuchi again. However, when Kurotsuchi saw what he was doing and noticed him ready to charge, she already knew the general dynamics of the attack. She ran forward towards one of the Naruto clones and jumped onto its shoulder before pushing herself into the air. In the air, she successfully dodged the attack as Naruto went past, having missed his target. Up in the cage box, Onoki grinned at his granddaughter's display. She dodged it, Naruto said, surprised before he saw Kurotsuchi performing hand seals again. That trick won't work with me. You need the opponent to be staying in a spot to let it hit. It's a direct hit move, so if they're moving then you won't be able to hit them. She said as Naruto grinned. You are not like the rest. You're a real kunoichi, give me the best you got. Naruto said. Kurotsuchi smirked in response. The only real competition I get back home that is in our age range is against Anko and Itachi. Well, I should impress since I have a reputation to uphold. I have Iowa blood running through me and I aim to make my family proud. Is that not what you are doing? Something like that, though mine is only to certain members of my family. There are a few that I am showing them what they missed out on, what they did not help. He said bitterly as he glanced up at his father, who sat there watching the battle with calculating eyes. They stared towards each before they both began to make a set of hand seals, both at similar speeds and similar actions and motions. Kaden. Hai Barreto no Jutsu. Naruto reciprocated with his own, Sweden, Mizu Barreto no Jutsu. Water and fire balls rushed towards their targets at great speed but collided with one another, creating a small veil of steam to begin to appear and engulf the lower field, making it a little difficult for some to see what was happening. Neither stopped their attack as fire and water rained down through the field, trying to bypass the other but neither having any success. She really is pretty good. Naruto thought. It's to be expected that the son of the Yellow Flash would be this skilled. Kurotsuchi thought in return. Deciding to take it up a notch, Kurotsuchi smiled to herself before she jumped onto the high walls, looking down at Naruto, who stared up at her as did the others in the crowds and who was watching. She made a few had seals before shout, Yoden, Yogen no aim. She called out as she took a deep breath and shot out large glomps of lava from her mouth high into the air and watched as it began to separate from large glomps and into small and smaller pieces until it was just like bits of hail. One bit fell onto Naruto's shirt sleeve and quickly burnt a hole into it. Naruto quickly ripped the sleeve off and threw it aside, not wanting to get those kind of burns touch his skin. She knows Yoden. I did not even know Iwa had any shinobi who could use that bloodline. Shizune asked as Suand, and Hiruzen narrowed her eyes as did Makoto from her seat. There was a clan that specialized and could use the Yoden bloodline long ago, but they got split and separated throughout the year and got spread throughout the years, similar to that of the Uzumaki. My guess is that someone from that girl's family carried the Yoden bloodline and it was passed down to her. On the field, Naruto looked at her surprise. Yoden, huh? This takes things to a new level. I have to be more careful around her and I can't let that lava touch me if it will be lights out for me. He thought. You look a little out of it. I hope that little treat I just gave you did not burn you too badly. She said as she grinned at him as he looked up at her. Not at all, though I was a little surprised. This does not change the fact I will still kick your. He said, making her glare down at him. We will see who will be the one to get their kicked. She said as she went through another lot of hand seals. Yoden. Yogen Kiryu no Jutsu. This time a large stream of lava shot out from her mouth and rushed towards him. Naruto quickly saw the danger and immediately jumped as far away as he could from harm's way. However, he noticed that when the lava hit the ground, it began to spread across the floor and slowly begin to cover the ground. Lava is basically molten rock that had been superheated up and had taken a kind of middle ground between liquid and solid. Kept hot it stays as a liquid, but when super cooled it will harden and become rock. He thought before a thought came to his mind. Which means water should be effective against it. He muttered to himself as he went through hand seals and channeled his chakra. Sweden. Mizorapa, he said as a strong jet of water shot forward and covered over the lava and quickly showed to have already stopped it from moving forward. The jet of water was stationed just a bit into the air so the water could evenly spread over the lava and harden it. After a few moments the jet of water stopped as steam was emitted from the lava and showed the lava had rapidly cooled down to formed a layer of rock on top of the surface of the field. Doden. Daichi no Supaiku Seiki. Kurotsuchi called as Naruto saw that the earth layer that had been created from the lava getting cooled down suddenly shot up. The great thing about lava is once it has cooled down it just turns to earth, enabling me to use my arsenal of earth jutsus. Kurotsuchi called as Naruto dodged each of the spikes, though at the end the last one managed to leave a slash across his left shoulder, making him wince a little and making those watching from Iowa cheer. Naruto jumped back away from the earth as much as he could before he gripped his right fists tightly. He looked up towards Tsunade, who looked back at him before she gave him a nod. Now the tables are about to be turned, Naruto said as Kurotsuchi listened to his words and narrowed her eyes. Since you seem to like the flat earth so much, let's rumble it around a little. Before he threw his hand up and struck a similar pose to Tsunade's chakra pumped into his fist. When those from Konoha saw that stance, many paled while Minato and Kushina's eyes went as white as saucers. She didn't teach him that move surely. Jiraiya thought as he watched what Naruto was about to do. In the stadium everyone waited with bated breaths before Naruto swung his chakra-enhanced fist down onto the ground. Hoo-ah! He cried out as his fist impacted the ground. As soon as it hit the earth beneath him shook uncontrollably and giant cracks began to form all over the field. Kurotsuchi looked around in a panic as she saw the cracks were forming around where she was standing. She began to wobble on her spot as the ground suddenly began bursting all around her and huge pieces of earth began shooting out of the ground as the field began tearing itself apart. This is not good, she thought as she jumped back and tried to stick to one of the walls, but when she did she saw Naruto appeared in front of her in a great burst of speed. I'm ending this, Naruto thought to himself before he used a chakra-enhanced kick to her stomach, making her lose her breath and get the wind knocked out of her and sent her into the air. He then appeared above her in great speed again and threw her to the ground before appearing on the ground just as she was about to meet the ground. He then raised his right leg as high as he could, and just as she went past him towards the ground he swung his right leg into her back and smashed her into the ground, making a small crater form from underneath her. Suten Kyaku, he said as he did the move before it was over. He looked down towards Kurotsuchi and saw that she was still conscious but was pretty battered and would not be getting up any time soon. He sighed and swept a hand through his hair and dropped down next to her on his butt. Though his control with the super strength was good, it was still not quite enough to not leave him a little fatigued. You beat me, she said sadly as she tried to raise her head but couldn't. I guess I did, though if it helps you gave me one hell of a fight. You did not make it easy, he said as she nodded. I guess that's okay then, she said as Naruto looked over towards Pakura, who nodded and gave the signal. The winner of the match is Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze. Once she did, many in the audience cheered while the audience members from Iowa groaned a little and looked away, not happy their shinobi lost to him. His siblings in Konoha cheered loudly again as little Mina stood up on her mother's lap and cheered with her arms in the air, smiling and giggling happily. Kushina clapped but was out of words to say from her eldest son's performance. Kurotsuchi lay on the ground. She knew her grandfather would no doubt give her a telling off for losing, which made her groan. How was I supposed to know how good he was? She thought before she felt a relaxing feeling spread through her back that felt nice and cool. She looked over to see Naruto with his hand on her back with his hands glowing green. "What are you doing?" she asked, furrowing her brow at him. "What does it look like I am doing?" "I'm healing you, of course," he said, surprising her. "Why? Why not?" he said, shrugging. "It won't tire me out if that is what you were thinking. I have a lot of chakra. More than both my parents put together when they were my age." Kurotsuchi did not say anything, but after few minutes felt the pain lessen before the medics took over and put her on a gurney. As they took her back, she looked over to see Naruto walking back to the fighter box. When she did, their two eyes met, and for just a moment they both thought about how pretty the other's eyes were. Naruto walked back to the box to find Itachi standing there looking towards him. "I guess it's just us left now. Are you going to give me your best, Naruto?" Itachi asked as he leaned against the wall. Naruto grinned. "As long as you give me your best, then I will give you mine. Then we are in agreement." As the two stood there catching their breath and letting themselves get small rests before they go out onto the field. Cage box. "So it's another Konoha-filled finals. There is a surprise," said as he leaned back and put his head in his hand as he lounged lazily. "Yes, though my granddaughter put up a good fight, I guess it just was not enough. We will have to up her training," he said to the big man next to him, who nodded silently as he looked down towards the field. The cage turned to Minato. "I did not know Tsunade had taken on an apprentice, let alone taught someone the secret to her super strength. You looked just as surprised as everyone else did. I take it you did not know." Inwardly, Minato was more surprised at what his son had managed to do and knew that once they were back in Konoha he needed to speak with Naruto and Tsunade. Outwardly, though, he was playing it cool. "I guess my son has the art of deception down since he surprised all of us," he said as the cage nodded while Minato looked back at Kakashi, who was no doubt surprised as well. "Konoha. Kushina, you never told us Naruto was so developed in his shinobi skills. By his performance, I would say he should have been made Chunin long ago," Yoshino said as her son Shikamaru slept just in the seat beside her. The other mothers had all said the same thing. None had known that Naruto was at his current level. He even surprised them when he healed Kurotsuchi, since everyone else would have just walked and left here there. Kushina stared but never continued. She did not know what to say as his eyes were just fixed on the screen where her son was. Her children were all sitting by her feet now, with Mina sitting on Mito as the sisters played together while Eiji was with little Kiba and Izuka. "Naru-chan," she whispered as her bottom lip trembled. Stadium. Makoto waited with bated breath as she waited for her son and her student to walk out on the field, not entirely sure who she wanted to win. She did not want to play favorites, yet her mother's side of her wanted her boy to win it, even though she did not mind which of the two won in the end. Fugaku meanwhile sat with a stoic expression along with many of the other members of the Uchiha clan. She did not need to guess who he wanted to win. He had told Itachi before they left for Suna that he was to win at all costs, so that he could show everyone why the Uchiha clan was to be respected and feared. Itachi had said nothing and had just nodded. Tsunade, Hiruzen and Shizune meanwhile sat little nervously, knowing this would be the fight Naruto would have most trouble with. Fighting against a Sharingan was difficult on many levels, and one had to try and not look them in the eye. If they did, then it was all over. They had taught him all he knew, and now it was time for him to put it to the real test. Everyone chatted silently as Pakura looked up to the cage box and saw the nod from the cage indicating the 10-minute break was over. The final match of the Chunin exams are about to begin. Would Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze and Itachi Uchiha come onto the field? She said as cheers immediately began to sound out through the stadium. Both boys walked onto the field and stood in the center before they turned to face one another. Naruto and Itachi looked at one another from across the field, both with serious and focused looks plastered on their faces. Good luck, Uchiha, Naruto said, grinning at him as Itachi did the same. And to you, Uzumaki. Pakura stood beside the two boys and saw they were both ready and just waiting for her signal. She took a deep breath, put her right arm in the air and then swung down. Hajime, Pakura called out as the match began, though many were surprised when neither of the boys moved an inch. Mama, why they not moving? Ria asked from Makoto's lap as she pouted that nothing was happening in front of her. Neither one are moving. They're waiting for the others to make one tiny slip up so they can take advantage of it. Shizune said as Suand and Hiruzen nodded with a similar thought. All the cages sat in the box waiting for one of them to make a move, being very patient and knowing what they were doing. The bodyguards were all doing the same. Then after a few minutes they finally moved. Both boys had a finger flinch at the same time and the other now tried to use that as an invite to attack. Both Naruto and Itachi threw a kunai at one another, which only met in the middle and made a loud clang sound out through the arena. The two boys pushed off from the ground and went forward and met each other in the middle as they began a taijutsu battle. Itachi went for an uppercut which Naruto managed to dodge by stepping back before Itachi then tried to sweep the legs. Naruto jumped it and then shot his right leg towards Itachi's head, which Itachi managed to block with his left elbow. He then went forward and grabbed Naruto's shoulder and, like earlier with Anko, flipped over him in an attempt to throw him. Naruto, however, when he was thrown, somersaulted through the air and made a cage bushin behind him, which threw him back forward and shoulder barged Itachi, which made the Uchiha take a few steps back. Itachi narrowed his eyes and his Sharingan appeared. When they did, Naruto immediately averted his eyes and began looking anywhere else but his eyes. Your Sharingan doesn't to scare me, Itachi. As long as I don't look you in the eye, then you can't put a genjutsu on me. Naruto said. But you will have to look up eventually, Naruto. It's only a matter of time. Itachi said as Naruto took the handle of the Shisui out. Itoryu. Sanjiroku pound ho. Naruto said as he struck the air with great force and a massive swipe of dense wind shot forward at great speed towards Itachi. Itachi, however, saw it coming and with his Sharingan activated managed to dodge out of the way in time as he watched the attack go past him and strike the wall from behind him. When it struck, the giant wall split in half with a very deep slash now embedding in the concrete. Itachi did not let Naruto have another chance to attack him. Kaden. Gukaku no Jutsu. He called as fire shot forward and towards Naruto. In retaliation, Naruto gripped Shisui and swung it with great force as he sent another great slash like he had just used towards the fireball. When they met, a small explosion went off which got a plume of smoke to from. Naruto looked around the field as the smoke from the blast obscured his view. Though he did not have to search long as he then looked up to see Itachi in the air with kunais with paper bombs attached to them in each hand and then threw them towards him. Seeing the kunais coming towards him, Naruto made hand signs. Sweden. Mizu Barreto no Jutsu. He said as glomps of water shot out of his mouth and began taking out the kunai. He hit 9 of the 10 kunais, but one that was hiding behind the shadow of another kunai managed to get past and landed beside Naruto. He saw it and saw the paper bomb light up before it suddenly exploded beside him. Naru-chan. Shizune and Tsunade called out while some of the Uchihas along with Fugaku grinned at the event. Itachi landed on the ground just a few feet from where Naruto was standing and looked at the post where his friend and rival had previously been standing. Where did you go, Naruto? He thought as he saw empty spot where he had been standing. Front, left, right, up, behind. That only leaves, he started as he looked down to the ground beneath him. Just as he did, the ground began to crack and shake, making Itachi's eyes widen slightly and jumped back as quickly as he could. A tan chakra-enforced fist shot out of the ground and missed Itachi by an inch and sailed past him. Though that missed, Naruto brought up his left leg and kicked Itachi in the stomach, making the boy keel over slightly and before getting pushed back and skid along the ground, though managing to still stand. Itachi, though in slightly pain, did not allow any more time to be lost. Kaden. Susei no Hai. He said as thick glomps of fire shot into the air, covering a small portion of the arena as small comet-shaped fireballs began raining down towards Naruto. An interesting move. I don't think I have seen that one before. Hiruzen said as he examined the jutsu. Some of the other fire user in the arena watching were thinking the same thing. On the field, Naruto saw the small fire comets coming towards him. Sweden. Sujinheki. He called as shot water out of his mouth and built up a wall in front of him that went about 10 meters high into the air. The fire comets went through the water wall and immediately called off and either disappeared into nothing or began little steam balls that Naruto easily swipe away with Shisui. Naruto then pushed himself off the ground and towards Itachi and swung Shisui at him. Itachi, though, saw the move coming and whipped out a kunai in each hand and blocked the blade, and the two then began trading swipes of metal. Sparks flew all around them quickly and bright as the two traded blows. Naruto swung his Shisui at Itachi, trying to hit parts of the body that were vital in order to bring him down quicker and try to end the match sooner. However, Itachi's Sharingan was preventing it as it kept locked on him and his movements and managed to read what move he would do next and either dodged or blocked the strikes. In the crowd, many were cheering as they watched the display between Naruto and Itachi, and most were of the civilians were on the edge of their seats. It won't last much longer. The blonde Namikaze brat does not stand a chance against the Sharingan. His attempts are futile. Fugaku said as some of the Uchiha agreed with him while Makoto scowled at her husband's words. This match is very close. Both boys are fighting on even grounds. Hiruzen added. Yes, but if Naruto actually used that skill set he knows, then it would have been over a lot quicker. Tsunade said quietly, motioning about Naruto's Mokuton as Hiruzen nodded. However, they both knew why Naruto wouldn't use that skill set till he was much older. On the field, Naruto was internally getting a little frustrated that he was not landing many of his strikes on Itachi as the Uchiha kept blocking them. He has increased his speed a lot. I need to find some way to slow him down. Naruto thought before an idea popped into his head that made him internally smile. Itachi watched as Naruto swung his blade again towards him and his Sharingan easily followed the movements. His Sharingan was so focused on the sword that it did not catch. Naruto put his hand into one of his pouches and bring out a brush. When Itachi blocked the strike with his kunai, Naruto smirked and put his brush forward and swiped it across Itachi's hand, quickly and skillfully drawing a seal on the back of his hand. Itachi felt the brush touch his skin and his eye widened a little when he saw the black seal on his hand. He jumped back a little and saw the seal on his hand, and with his knowledge of seals to a degree, he recognized it was a weight seal. Should have kept your eye on the other hand, Itachi. Naruto said as he made a hand movement. Fuin. Minato and Kushina's eyes widened in surprise as they both thought the same thing. I didn't think that he would be that skilled in Fuinjutsu. We need to figure out how he got so strong. I can't even remember teaching him any of what he is using. As soon as he did that, Itachi's left hand dropped to the ground like a heavy weight and went down to one knee. He tried to stand up, but there was just too much weight pressing down on his hand. He sighed and looked towards Naruto. That was a good move, Naruto, but you forgot one thing. Naruto raised an eyebrow. You looked in my eyes. He said as everything around Naruto suddenly began to distort and the sky became a light purple and he saw everyone in the stands disappear. Itachi, who was in front of him, was now gone. When did I look in his eyes? He thought as he went over what happened and realized it must have been when he added the seal to Itachi's hand. His eyes must have caught mine when I was adding the seal. I have to get out of this as quick as I can. He thought as he began cutting off his chakra through his body. I need to release a large burst of chakra in order to release the genjutsu. So that is what he did as he began storing up chakra from his body and to be ready to release a large burst of it and be released. He had plenty of chakra left, but after the long day he could feel his body and his muscles aching as the day began to take its toll on him. You're a failure, a voice suddenly said from next to him as he turned beside him to see his dad standing there scowling at him. You're a failure of a shinobi. We didn't bother teaching you because I know you were not worth the effort. You could never be the child I always wanted to raise. Naruto widened his eyes a little at that, but he looked forward. This is not real. It's just an illusion, he said as he suddenly felt some kind of strike hit his face. He looked forward to see Kushina now standing in front of him with her palm outstretched. I pushed you away because I did not want you anymore. Why would want you when I have 3 perfect little children that I can love and spoil? I never wanted you to begin with, she said as she glared at him. This is not real, he continued to say to himself as he stored up more chakra to release. From behind him he then felt a strikes hit him and saw Senbons sticking out of him. It was Shizune, Suand and Hiruzen all standing there with Shizune's hand stretched showing she had thrown the Senbons. Why did we train you? You're just a waste of our time, they said together. Then from all around him other people began to appear. Makoto, Anko, Mina, Mito, Eiji, Kakashi, and Jiraiya all stood there glaring towards him, all circling around him, all saying the same thing. This is not real, this is not real. He kept saying to himself, not noticing that while he focused on what they were saying, he was storing more chakra than necessary. The people around him got closer and got louder as all he could hear were their words, and he shook his head furiously. Shut up, he shouted as he unleashed the chakra he had stored up and that shot out from all around him. The illusion around him flickered before it faded away and the crowds and Itachi came back into view. His chakra continued to burst around and caused large cracks to form in the ground as well as rubble to get swept away from how powerful it was. Many in the audience were left speechless, his father included, at how much chakra he had and how powerful it was. What did he do? Tsunade asked, scowling a little, and looked at Naruto in worry as she watched him drop to one knee and panted. No doubt the large amount of chakra he unleashed sapped him of his energy and chakra. Naruto has that much chakra, Minato thought, leaning forward in his seat. That almost double the amount Kushina had when she was that age. Just how much chakra does Naruto have? Naruto panted and looked at Itachi, who had finally broke the weight seal on his hand, but looked as ragged and exhausted as he did. The days have been long and hard on both of them. I'm kicking your big time for that genjutsu, he said as Itachi looked at him a little sorry. I don't have much chakra left, and by the looks of thing neither do you. So how about we finish this with one last move? Winner take all, Itachi offered. One move? Naruto asked, raising an eyebrow as his mouth flickered in a tin grin. I'm game. Perfect way to get you back for that illusion, he said as they took a few steps further away from one another. Everyone in the stadium watched as Itachi did a few hand signs and then stuck hand in front of him. His chakra appeared in his left hand before the chakra suddenly set on fire. He then put it to the side and the fire then spread around his hand and up just past his wrist. The shape of the fire went to a spear shape. Many again looked at it in fascination, Uchihas included. Not even Makoto had seen her son use that move before, and he had not used that move before in one of their sparring and training sessions. Kakashi, who was behind Minato, looked at it in surprise. It's like my Reikiri, only instead of lightning, it's fire. He is recognized as a genius. It should not be that surprising that he made his own version. Minato said as Kakashi nodded while the other cage all looked in fascination. Wow, that's pretty cool, Naruto said as Itachi readied to shoot forward. But now it's time for my move. One I am sure many will recognize. Naruto then stood up and put his right hand out with his palm facing upwards. It was then that Konoha Shinobi heard the familiar swirling sound that made Minato, Tsunade, Kakashi, Shizune, Hiruzen and others widen their eyes to epic proportions when they realized what he was doing. In Naruto's hand, chakra began to swirl around in his hand before it began to form and take the shape of a sphere. It made a swirling sound and it pulsed in his hands. Itachi looked a little surprised before he went back to have an emotionless look on his face. How does Naruto know the Rasengan? Minato asked standing up from his seat. I'm not sure. But I had to guess, it seems Naruto has been going through your things, it's the best explanation to him knowing that jutsu. Kakashi added. Back in Konoha, Kushina and the other mothers had looks that resembled gaping fish, not really believing that what they were seeing was real. Kushina, Minato taught him the Rasengan. Was that really that wise? Sume said as Hana stared to her friend in awe. He didn't. I know Minato didn't. We have spoken about not teaching anyone the Rasengan until we felt it was time. We did not even want to teach the twins the Rasengan until they were at least 12, maybe 13. She said as they all looked at her. Then Kushina realized something. We had never even intended to teach it to Naruto. We weren't going to teach him his birthright. Is this what Tsunade meant that day we told her to teach the twins medical ninjutsu? Well, I guess Naruto did not get that memo. Hitomi Hyuga said as by her feet, Mina, Eiji and Mito watched their big brother in fascination and the blue orb in his hands. Back on the field, Naruto and Itachi positioned themselves readily and eyed each other. Itachi had his Sharingan activated while Naruto's eyes seemed to glow with power radiating from it. Then they both pushed forward and ran towards each other at great speed. Itachi had his lead brought back behind him as did Naruto with the Rasengan. Those in the audience were completely silent as the two moved opposed each other and suddenly got thrown forward and towards one another. The only sound through the arena was the sound of the attacks. Kajin. Rasengan. Both attacks met head-on and the sound of the clash resonated through the arena as they collided. The wind around the two boys picked up before a strong shockwave erupted from around the two boys as the two attacks fought for dominance. The ground beneath them cracked away along with the area around them. The entire arena was hit by a strong shockwave and wind that many put their hands in front of their faces. This is insane. Who knew kids like this could have this kind of power? Akumo Shinobi said as he tried to stop the wind lashing at his face. The two attacks continued to fight for dominance as neither Naruto nor Itachi let up before they both let out a loud shout and the attacks in the area around them completely exploded and went up in smoke. The explosion knocked many of their seats and others had to use chakra to stay in their seat. Naruto. Itachi. Back in Konoha, Kushina was on her feet as she held her hand to her mouth after seeing her eldest get enveloped by the smoke and dust. Mito, Eiji and Mina look a little confused but had sad looks on their faces and Mina looked ready to cry. Makoto was in a similar situation as she wanted to jump into the stadium and check her son and student were still alive. Sasuke looked down worriedly as did Ria who like Mina looked ready to cry. Fugaku though looked as stoic as ever. Tsunade and Shizune looked ready to jump down but Hiruzen planted his hand on their shoulder muttering that Naruto was okay. In the box all the cage looked a little wide-eyed at the final attack and Minato looked concerned towards his son who he still could not see. Slowly though the cloud of smoke disappeared, revealing that the entire arena was completely and utterly wrecked and the walls looked like they were barely standing. Eventually the figure of Naruto and Itachi appeared and showed them both standing shoulder to shoulder while both were looking and facing opposite directions. Both looked ready to drop and their clothes were in tatters. They had cuts all over their bodies and bruises forming. Naruto's left hand looked very burnt while Itachi looked a little mangled, indicating some broken bones. Everyone sat on the edge of their seats as they waited for the two boys to move or to even speak. Itachi and Naruto turned their heads towards each other and both gave off a small smile before Itachi spoke. "I guess you got me," he said as his eyes rolled into the back of his head and fell to his knees and went unconscious. Many gasped at that while Naruto looked at Pakura, who reappeared on the field and looked a little shocked from the fight she had seen. She lifted her arm in the air. The winner of the match and winner of the Chunin exams is Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze. As soon as she did, most in the stadium got on their feet and clapped wildly at the amazing battle they had just seen. Most clapped while some for Kumo and Iwa scowled a little and just looked away. Naruto smiled at the crowd and saw his father look at him in disbelief, no doubt not believing his son just won the exams. With the match over, Naruto breathed out a heavy breath before he fell backwards, the exhaustion of the day now taking its toll on him. Uzumaki or not, he had his limits. When he did, Tsunade, Shizune, Hiruzen and Makoto left their seats and jumped into the stadium. Makoto went straight to her son with Shizune coming up behind her to check him over while Tsunade and Hiruzen checked on Naruto. "Let's get them both to the med bay. They will need some serious resting after today," Tsunade said as she picked up Naruto up gently on her back, with Makoto doing the same for Itachi before they quickly left the stadium. Shizune hurried with them while Hiruzen picked up Naruto's blade in his hands and followed after them.